Welcome back to the County Council. We are going to start this afternoon's event with a proclamation recognizing National Walk and Roll to School Day, and that will be led by Councilmember Jawando, with Councilmember Stewart, Balcom, and myself participating, otherwise known as the T&E Committee.
Right. Well, yes, please, if you're here for this proclamation, our MCPS folks, MC Dot, even though I'm very disappointed that our zebra is not here from Safe to Walk to Schools, but that's okay. I know someone who lives inside the zebra sometimes is here. Vision Zero, Wade Holland, Coalition for Smarter Growth, WABA, and obviously my colleagues. So come on down. I was joking with my colleagues before we came up a year ago. I was on a scooter and I could have literally rolled down here. But I want to thank all my colleagues for participating as chair of the E&C committee, also as a father of 4 school-age children. Getting to school is always a monumental event. You know, I often say we do more before 8 o'clock than a lot of people, but getting our kids there safely and in a way that emphasizes the importance of multimodal transportation and health and safety is also really, really important. So this annual event that we're celebrating today declares National Walk and Roll, not rock and roll, walk and roll, promotes healthy, sustainable transportation habits for our children and our families. It's part of an international movement that has pushing for year-round safe routes to schools. We've had a lot of discussion about that here at the council. Just passed a major piece of legislation, which I'm sure we'll hear about. We're going to talk about the pedestrian master plan. This is a big priority for all of us. And no matter how you do it, getting to school safe is what we want. And we want to also have the side benefits of improving our students' health and their mental health and their physical health and their well-being and their quality of life. And so it's important that we recognize these healthy habits and we participate in helping improve our environment. So expanding safe routes to schools has been a big priority for this council, for me in particular, and for all of my colleagues. So I'll turn it over first to the chair of the T&E committee and our Council President Glass.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Jawando. I am really glad that you've organized this today because we've been doing a lot and will continue doing a lot to make sure that our kids are safe when they're walking or rolling or biking or driving or any way that they are getting to and from school. They need to be safe. You know, it breaks my heart every time I see a message of a child who was injured while going to or from school. And just this morning, there was another young person who was injured in Montgomery Village. And it is another reminder of why we do this work, why we passed the Safe Streets Act last week, why we are taking up the pedestrian master plan later today. And the efforts continue because already this year we've had 400 people who've been hit and 11 people who've been tragically killed. So we got our work to do, but we're all doing it. And I appreciate Councilmember Jawando for leading this.
Thank you, Council President. Then we'll hear from Councilmember Stewart and Councilmember Balcom in that order.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Jawando, for heading this up today. And I just want to thank everyone who is here and say, you know, thinking about how our young people get to and from school door to door is about a community effort. And that's what you see up here today. You see the County Council, our Department of Transportation, MCPS, as well as advocates here today. And I just want to do a shout out because they're busy, so they couldn't be here, but crossing guards are also a main part of the folks who make sure our young people get to and from school safely. And this is about our communities, it's about our infrastructure, it's about raising awareness and all of us coming together. So I'm glad we could do this today and make sure that every school day this is top of mind. Thank you.
Thank you. If you've been following us, you know that transportation has been on our minds and at the dais for several weeks now with the Safe Streets Act and Pedestrian Master Plan. Stay tuned. We'll be talking about it here in a few minutes. And it's great to celebrate and encourage Walk and Roll to School Day, but it's our job to make sure that we do that safely. We need to get kids out walking, but we need to make sure that they have a safe route. I live right across the street from a high school. I see kids going across a busy street all day long. We've just so thrilled. We just got crosswalks. We've been there for 29 years, and we just got a series of crosswalks. And so we're trying to do that work, and the primary purpose is to make sure our kids are safe. So thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Jawando, for doing this today.
Absolutely. We want everyone to be safe on our roadways. We're going to invite up, we have many advocates and supporters here, but we're just going to have one speak today. Seth Grimes from WABA, the Washington Area Bicyclists Association.
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando and your colleagues for introducing this proclamation. It does hit all of the right points. Biking, walking, and rolling to school means community. It means self-confidence for kids. It is a healthy way to get to school. It is the environmental way to get to school. WABA has been very happy to work with Montgomery County, the Washington Area Bicyclists Association. Going back 10 years, one of my colleagues tells me to offer classes on learning to bike, both for kids and adults, because you want to have adults who are comfortable with biking, with walking to school, with rolling to school, if they're going to let their kids walk. It is extremely important that you have enacted safety legislation such as the Safe Streets Act. We've been glad to stand with the County Council on that, and we look forward to working with you on future bills, and we've been working with state legislators, for instance, to enact provisions from the Safe Streets Act as state law applying to state roads. So thank you very much for this proclamation, for having us all here today.
And I should mention this is not the day, it's October 4th. But we are proclaiming it today because of the schedule, and we love it so much we wanted to do it early. And so I'll start the proclamation, and then we will rotate. And it'll be myself, Councilmember Glass, Councilmember Stewart, Councilmember Balcom, and then Councilmember Glass again, and then I'll close this out. Whereas National Walk and Roll to School Day was created in 1997 by the Partnership for a Walkable America, and
whereas today thousands of schools participate in the annual one-day event in October, which has become part of a movement for year-round safe routes to schools, and this year's National Walk and Roll Day will be held on October 4th. And
Whereas Walk and Roll to School Day is an international event that takes place in over 40 countries worldwide, and walking and rolling to school helps build community and gives children a strong sense of self-confidence and a better quality of life. And
whereas expanding safe routes to school is directly related to Montgomery County's Vision Zero goals to reduce traffic fatalities and injuries, and whereas
whereas Walk and Roll to School Day creates sustainable and healthy habits among our youngest transportation users and their families, building more environmentally conscious communities for a healthy planet. Now therefore be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby celebrates National Walk and Roll to School Day, and be it further resolved that the County Council encourages all county residents to walk and roll with family members, friends, and neighbors. Presented this day, the 26th of September, signed by myself, Councilmember Stewart, Councilmember Balcom, and Council President Glass on behalf of the entire council. And we'll take a picture. So happy Walk and Roll to School Day.
There's a song in there somewhere. Okay, thank you very much for everybody who presented that last proclamation. And as was noted, if you enjoyed that conversation, more of it will be happening this afternoon. We are now going to move into public hearings, and this is a public hearing on the WSSC water spending control. The Transportation and Environment Committee work session is scheduled for October 9th. Those wishing to submit testimony for the council's consideration must do so before the close of business on October 2nd. We have one speaker for this hearing, and I see Mr. Bren. And so, Gordy, I'll bring you on up. There you go.
I got it.
You got it. You got 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Gordy Burney with the Taxpayers League. Good afternoon. WSSC is close to insolvency without another big rate increase or reductions to costs that gobble up cash and require never-ending rate increases. Like heroin addicts, management will ask for an 8% rate increase instead of cutting costs. That's on top of the 7% increase you approved for the current year. A succession of above-market rate increases over the last 20 years is an annual ritual to restore costs lost to excessive spending by this bloated monopoly. It's impossible to say with precision when WSSC will reach the point of not being able to pay its bills, but that crisis will happen if WSSC remains on its current path of rate hikes, poor decisions about priorities, and excessive costs. This uncertainty is principally due to two factors. First, the timing of the crisis will be affected by unknowns and changes to the economic environment, for instance, interest rates, and the possibility of an economic downturn, looking increasingly likely. Second, WSSC has shown itself resourceful in delaying a crisis through various unsustainable tricks in bookkeeping and fiscal management. Tricks that led to a situation where Fitch, the bond underwriter, declared a negative outlook. When an untimely, inevitable crisis occurs, WSSC will undoubtedly claim to be surprised by the impact of unforeseeable events. But we're here today to tell you that based on WSSC's own forecast, that is anything but unforeseeable. WSSC's path towards a crisis is one we've documented to you all and other elected leaders in testimony and reports over the years. We are not surprised the actual acute phase of the crisis is still ahead of us, but that makes it inevitable given the causes are unsustainable. What will WSSC's acute financial crisis look like when it strikes? First, it will not result in the shutting off of water or sewer, but it will result in higher rates and more service interruptions. And importantly, it will result in WSSC tapping into its statutory ability to raise revenue from property owners in both counties in its service area. In effect, a taxpayer bailout pre-authorized by law. A state component to the bailout is distinctly possible, and there's no contingency plan whatsoever for this. County property owners, WSSC ratepayers, and voters generally are all the same people and will, of course, be furious, particularly if they conclude, as they should, that the crisis they will have to pay to resolve would have been fully avoidable had you and others made prudent, proactive decisions. Consider how property taxpayers reacted to the new line items last year on their property tax bill, and then multiply that reaction by 10. Our written testimony highlights 7 reasons that you can anticipate insolvency. And I thank you today for considering this. I understand October 9th is the hearing. I hope the members of the T&E committee take this serious and this year rein in the costs, both operating and capital, and develop a state contingency plan. Thank you.
We are taking it seriously, and there is a T&E committee work session on October 9th. So, Mr. Brennan, thank you very much for your testimony. This public hearing is now closed. Next is a public hearing on supplemental appropriation 24-6 to the FY24 budget, operating budget for the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection, Environmental Protection Agency State and Tribal Assistance Grant Program for $500,000. The source of funds are federal funds. Council action is scheduled immediately after this hearing. There are no speakers for this hearing, so this public hearing is now closed. Is there a motion to approve supplemental appropriations 24-6 to the FY24 operating budget to the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection for Environmental Protection Agency State and Tribal Assistance Grant Program in the amount of $500,000?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Vice President Friedson, seconded by Councilmember Sales. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Next is a public hearing on a resolution to amend FY23 to 28 CIP and supplemental appropriation 24-5 for DOT traffic signals in the amount of $184,787.50. The source of funds are current revenue, general revenue. Council action is immediately scheduled following this hearing. There are no speakers for this hearing, and so this public hearing is now closed. Is there a motion to approve the resolution to amend the FY23 to 28 CIP and supplemental appropriation 24-5 for DOT traffic signals in the amount of $184,787.50?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Lutke, seconded by Vice President Friedson. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Next is a public hearing on a supplemental appropriation to the county government's FY24 capital budget and amendments to the FY23 to 28 capital improvements program in the amount of $562,000 for the Good Hope Road shared use path, and the source of funds are general obligation bonds. Council action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. There are no speakers for this hearing, so this public hearing is now closed. Is there a motion to approve the supplemental appropriation to the county government's FY24 capital budget and amendment to the FY23 to 28 CIP for the amount of $562,000 for the Good Hope Road shared use path? Moved by Councilmember Katz, seconded by Councilmember Jawando. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Okay, that is that with public hearings this afternoon. We are now going to sit as the District Council, where there are a number of items before us today. And so first, we're going to have a work session on the pedestrian master plan. So I invite our friends from the Planning Department and the Department of Transportation and any other related agencies to join us. Let me first thank everybody who's joining us at the table this afternoon and my colleagues on the T&E committee. We had two really good work sessions getting down into the details of this visionary document that was put together by the Planning Department. And what this document does is it builds on our commitment from our 2017 pledge to adopt and enact Vision Zero. Just this morning, and I noted this during the proclamation that was just provided in support of Walk and Roll to School Day, that just this morning a 14-year-old girl was struck by a vehicle in Montgomery Village while on her way to school. And it underscores again the important work that we need to do. And last week we passed the Safe Streets Act. Today we're taking up the Pedestrian Master Plan. And over the two work sessions that the T&E committee had, we did a lot of work adding to it and modifying some of the recommendations, recognizing, and I think this is a helpful framing for my colleagues and for everybody who's following. We need a visionary plan with respect to the design of our buildings, where people are going to live, where people are going to work. But it is also up to the Department of Transportation to implement that. And so the plan before us was drafted by the Planning Department, but the important reason we have Director Conklin and DOT is because so much of this will be left up to them to implement. And so this is the conversation we're going to have. Dr. Orlin, we'll start with you and then open it up. Does that work?
Sure. I wonder if I could take just about 30 seconds first, though, to introduce Stephen Kenny. Stephen, stand up wherever you are. He's my replacement. So this is his first day on the job, and he will be taking over duties as your transportation analyst. So welcome to Steve.
Well, for all the news we've made today, that is the biggest news. Welcome, Stephen, and Dr. Orlin will have more conversations before you leave.
Don't know what that means, but anyway.
You're not going anywhere just yet. That's what that
Well, I'm
means.
not, but that's all right. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is really just highlight the committee's recommendations as I go through. It's a long packet, and you have a long day ahead of you. Just to summarize, though, all of the recommendations from the committee were unanimous, save one. There was one split vote. I do want to make one point pretty clear, because there was a lot of letters we received in the last few days in response to an email blast that went out, which suggested that the T&E committee was explicitly prioritizing pedestrian safety over pedestrian comfort. That is not true. The committee talked about the issue, but it did not make any recommendations in the plan to prioritize one over the other. There was a discussion, which I'll get to towards the end, that the council should make an effort to sit on this issue, not to discuss this issue, and do that either explicitly as part of a separate work session or just part of the capital and operating budget deliberations. But there's nothing that the committee did which prioritizes pedestrian safety over pedestrian comfort. I made that comment, but it was clearly just a statement of where I think the council really ought to go. It is not what the committee did. So with that, let me just go to the recommendations. The first one really starts on pages 3 and 4 of the packet. And this is actually in the introduction to the section which describes all of the key actions. And there are 110 key actions in this plan, most of which the committee is not recommending any revisions to. I'll just read the paragraph, which would have the 2 sentences that were added. The existing conditions chapter of pedestrian master plan describe deficiencies in the pedestrian experience in detail using data sources developed specifically for this plan. This chapter provides recommendations to address the county's current shortcomings identified in the existing condition chapter. Then 2 new sentences. First sentence. These recommendations should be considered in further detail, such as by multi-agency partnerships, the Vision Zero Action Plan, and the Climate Action Plan for further refinement and consideration. That was added because there was some discussion that really needs more of a holistic conversation among the agencies, particularly DOT, the Vision Zero Coordinator, and the planning staff, to really fine-tune some of the recommendations that are in the plan. And the second sentence that was added is this. New and expanded programs will be considered by this and future councils in the context of the county's overall capital and operating funds. It was pointed out that according to the fiscal impact statement, the total cost of all the recommendations in the plan, if they were all carried out to their fullest, would be well more than the county could ever afford. So there would need to be some discussion as to what can fit within future capital and operating budgets as we go on. And this sort of leads to Councilmember Balcom's recommendation late in the packet, which basically asks for this conversation to occur that I just mentioned. So those 2 sentences are recommended to be added, and I guess that's the first stopping point, is that where's the council on the recommendation?
Thank you for that. Any of my T&E colleagues want to weigh in? Yeah, without objection. Let's just keep going.
You okay? The silence is golden.
Yeah, without objection, we'll just...
Moving on. On page 5, this is a relatively minor point, but it's still a change. There was a recommendation to continue to evaluate passive detection to eliminate the need for pedestrians to press a button to safely cross the street in areas where pedestrian recall is not desirable. The point here is that in most cases, or many cases at least, I think most, there is a automatic pedestrian cycle built into the in terms of intersection. However, in areas where there's really very low density, either rural areas or maybe low density suburban areas, then there's what's called well, basically what happens is the pedestrian has to push a button to ask for a pedestrian cycle, and the goal here is not to have to do that. And so the plan says that perhaps there are other ways of doing this, such as detections systems, which would detect whether or not there's a pedestrian ready to cross, and they wouldn't have to push a button. DOT made the point, though, that there may be some situations where push button would be useful, and so they recommended adding, and the planning staff didn't disagree with this, to add the sentence, push buttons may still be provided to assist visually impaired users with navigating crossings. And so the T&E committee did recommend adding that sentence.
Without objection, we'll accept that.
Okay. The next item is actually the one where there was a split vote. There was a recommendation from in the planning board's draft is to pursue a modification of state law to indicate that the driver of the vehicle must stop for pedestrians waiting to cross the street, not just those already in the crosswalk. Right now, if you enter the crosswalk, where they're just stepping off the curb, then by state law, vehicles have to physically stop, and actually in both directions, until the pedestrian has cleared the intersection. This would have it so that if pedestrians were just on the corner and maybe in the position of being ready to cross, that the vehicles would have to stop. DOT believes that that is not something that's really enforceable. It's really not the kind of thing where you really know as a driver whether or not the pedestrian's really crossing or just hanging out there for whatever reason. And so there was a back and forth on that, and I agreed with DOT on this. The committee, however, majority committee, Mr. Glass and Ms. Stewart, recommends concurring with the plan. Councilmember Balcom concurs with DOT and council staff to delete this particular action from the plan.
Thank you for sharing that conversation. I think the important point for everyone to note here is what the committee supported 2-1 was pursuing a modification, and it really is continued engagement, recognizing we need the State Highway Administration to be partners with us in all of this work, and it will require changes on their end as well, and this is just one of the items that we are adding into the conversation, trying to make sure that everybody is safe. And not seeing any comments. Councilmember Balcom, no? Okay. I don't see anybody. No? Okay, I'm going to ask the clerk. Hold on one second. We have a technical glitch here. Hold on. There we go. We'll go with Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Yeah, just appreciate those comments. I just would ask for maybe for a little further clarification. Obviously, we want to err on the side of safety in all instances, but obviously we don't. So there is a situation where you don't know, and I just want to know: is there any data or information that led up to the recommendation from DOT or from council staff or on the other side of how likely any measurement of like when a crash or someone is harmed, or what did you use as the basis of the recommendation? And then just explain again to Council President's point what this action is calling for. So maybe let's start with that.
Well, I would say the fact that the word pursue is important because it basically the council's made up its mind this is the right thing to do, and so you're trying to affirmatively to try to get the law changed to do that, as opposed to say consider this.
Right. Yeah, that was going to be my question with the language too. I think consider is, look into. That's why I'm asking about the data. Like, when you say do it, we should know that there's a sound basis to do it. So I guess I'll go to the second part of the question with Dr.
I can give you some
Director
background
Conlon.
on why we recommended not including this provision. And again, this isn't something that is a major impact to DOT. It's more of an impact to the law enforcement agencies than us.
Yeah.
The law as it's currently written is clear that when the pedestrian is in the crosswalk, if the vehicle doesn't stop, that's a violation. The situation that's being recommended here is less clear. It may be safer. We don't know whether it's safe or not because it's not the provision that's in place. It's only in place in a couple places, but if you're enforcing a law or there's an accident, the provision that the person was waiting to cross the street, that person is in a position to cross the street. We're not positive whether they're trying to cross the street or not. It's a more ambiguous phrasing than if they're in the crosswalk. That was the principal reason why we suggested not including this. But again, there was a lot of discussion of this at the T&E committee. And ultimately, the T&E committee recommended that the council pursue changing the law here so that if somebody's waiting to cross the street, there's a duty to yield, which is in theory might be safer, but again, in our estimation, a harder thing for both the driver to discern or a law enforcement official to make a judgment about
Right.
whether a citation should be issued or if there's a collision to cite the
who's at
driver
fault,
for
yeah.
something like that.
Obviously, if you have 1 foot in the crosswalk and you're
You're in the crosswalk.
you're in the crosswalk, if
Correct.
you're hit, obviously, this would be, I guess, and obviously if someone drove up on the curb and hit you, you'd be at fault too there.
For leaving, yeah.
Yeah, for leaving
Reckless driving or whatever.
Reckless,
other-
okay. Well, I'll hear from others, but I also have a little concern with the lack of clarity there. Get the intent, but maybe if colleagues would be open to considering, or I just want to know more about the jurisdictions that pursued it, why they did, what are the, that's the problem, that's the issue I have with it. Yeah.
Eli Glacier, for the record. Montgomery Planning. I think that's a fair question about whether the reasons that the jurisdictions that have it have pursued it. What we heard over the course of the several years that we were engaging in the pedestrian master plan engagement was that it was important, I think, to flip the transportation balance at these intersections, which are the locations of tremendous conflict in Montgomery County between pedestrians and bicyclists and people driving motor vehicles, to flip that from a presumption of the pedestrian having to insert themselves essentially into harm's way to earn the right of way, to being given the assumption of having the right of way when they're in a location and have the opportunity to enter the crosswalk. So I think the ambiguity that would be created and exists due to, as a result of the proposed language, that you're waiting to cross but you're not affirmatively crossing, is something that we should be comfortable with. Thinking about the fact that if you are using a wheelchair and you feel very uncomfortable entering the street to assert yourself, if you're queued up on the curb ramp waiting to cross and somebody stops for you, people stop for you, that's a much more pleasant, much safer experience for you as a wheelchair user. And on the flip side, let's say you're a driver and you stop for somebody. I have an abundance of caution under the law as proposed by the pedestrian plan, and they don't want to cross. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And last thing I'll say, as I think about it, I do what I think this recommendation is saying. If I see a crosswalk that does not have a signal, which is what we're talking about here, I see someone near it, I stop to try to let them, because most people don't stop, to try to let them go. And so I think that is the action we want. The question is, I'm trying to think of a situation of liability, because if there isn't a crash or a pedestrian's hit, they're going to be most likely hit on the street. So I don't know how I guess you could theoretically have a law enforcement official issuing a citation for someone who didn't stop because someone's standing on the side of the road, whether or not they intend to cross or not, which is a possibility.
Yeah, I don't think it's
that's the only, and I know that's no law enforcement are here. That's the ambiguity I'm concerned
Yeah,
about.
and I don't think it's a question of if there was a collision. I think it's more
If there isn't.
if there isn't one,
Right.
There's still a violation under this regime.
Well, if the person was intending to cross,
if they were intending to cross, yeah, I think that's a fair concern.
which we don't know you assume that that's the intention, but you also have to flip on I'm always worried about extra citations. And I don't want people who are walking across the street, in a non-crosswalk to be given a citation. I don't want, and on the flip side, this could create the other situation. So I appreciate this was helpful for my analysis. Thank you.
Vice President Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to committee members. Thank you to DOT and planning for your thoughtfulness on this. The way I approach this is to the point that was raised, just to pick up off of that. The goal here, it really isn't in the case of a collision, right? In the case of a collision, what this does is it declares that the pedestrian had the right of way if they were in a crosswalk. So if a collision takes place in a crosswalk, there is fault. A citation may be issued. If it's not in a crosswalk, it's a different story. Much broader conversation we can and should be having about that, given the lack of crosswalks and safe streets that we have and the challenges that proposes. The question here, though, is what are we trying to accomplish in this plan? And the issue that we're trying to accomplish in this plan is to make it safer to use our roadways, regardless of how you are using them. And so the question with this recommendation is really, on that question of safety. So just to give, a sense, I mean, most traffic violations are not enforced the overwhelming majority of the time. It is a rare moment where a violation takes place where there is a citation that is issued, just by numbers. And the idea is we hope to get some level of compliance based on the fine being high enough or based on the disruption being difficult enough. That is the incentivization that we have created in road safety. Other than that, we're basically trusting people more or less to use our roadways in the ways that we ask them. And so we set standards that we think make people safer, and overwhelmingly we are trusting people to self-enforce. Now, we need to enforce more, we need to make things safer, but that is generally how most things work. And so the question, one person's ambiguity is another person's cultural change. And so if the standard here is we expect a driver to slow down and stop and yield to a pedestrian who is waiting to cross, that is the cultural change that I think we are attempting to achieve here. And so, I would slightly change the thought process about this recommendation from an enforcement and a citation and a liability standpoint. Obviously needs to be part of that discussion, if and when state law is changed, and to the aspirational nature of what a master plan is and the type of safety that we're trying to accomplish, and say, what is the behavior that we want to expect from users of our roadways? And I think in keeping with the spirit of the rest of the document, the goal here is for people to yield when someone is waiting, so that someone doesn't have to risk their life entering the roadway in order to be afforded the protection that it provides. I mean, this is a perverse incentive that in order for you to have the right of way, you have to jump in the middle of traffic, which in many cases, in too many roadways in the county, is a literal death trap. And so, to me, that is a perverse dynamic where we are setting up a conflict rather than mitigating a conflict. And if there's any idea of what Vision Zero is supposed to be, it's supposed to mitigate conflicts, and when conflicts occur, make sure that they're not life-threatening. And so, to me, I appreciate that there are nuances here. This is a state law, but I think the spirit of it is setting the expectations. I'll just close by saying we fight very hard for certain changes on roadways, but the behavioral change is really what needs to be fixed, and they have to go in tandem. And just to give an example, in Bethesda, on Old Georgetown Road at Cordell, there is a flashing beacon that flashes a yellow light. You press the button in order to cross. It's a main area where Bethesda Elementary School students and their families cross. I cross it all the time. It's where people cross to go to the farmer's market with their families, people in wheelchairs, people with strollers. Cars do not stop, even with a flashing yellow signal, overwhelmingly. And I see this every single day. I walk it, I drive it, I bike it, I see it all the time. And so we have to change that culture. And it's not just with signal changes, and it's not just with painted crosswalk changes. We have to set a standard that we expect you to stop for a pedestrian because it's a life and death issue. So I appreciate the recommendation. I'll support the committee recommendation.
I appreciate the framing by Vice President Friedson. Before I turn it over to a number of my colleagues who are in the queue, I want to ask Acting Director Stern to share with the full council the way she described the pedestrian master plan. You know, we talked about it being aspirational, but there's a level of implementation as well. Can you elaborate on that for everybody
Sure,
to help
I will.
set the stage?
Sure. I didn't write those comments down, but I think I do recall.
We got them on video.
Yes, I could definitely refer to the video. Essentially, there was a discussion, again, Tanya Stern, Acting Planning Director, for the record. During one of the T&E Committee's work sessions, there was a discussion about the pedestrian master plan as a master plan and what is a function and purpose of a master plan. And one of the things that I pointed out was that, number one, master plans can be something as visionary, high-level policy as Thrive Montgomery 2050 as a general plan, and it could be a very detail-oriented, very place-specific sector plan for a particular area, or it could be something in the middle. And a pedestrian master plan is really something in the middle. It is both a combination of aspirational principles and recommendations and strategies to really change the culture, as Vice Chair Friesen noted, to also help the county think about how does it make decisions about transportation infrastructure to support pedestrian safety. It's not just about, whether or not to require a button here. Those things are a part of it, but it's really about we have to make different decisions about how we design and install and operate our transportation infrastructure to support pedestrian safety and comfort. And so it's very sort of high level, aspirational to that extent, but it does have very specific recommendations as well. So it sort of straddles that middle ground. But I think the important thing to keep in mind is that we like to talk about this plan as being very groundbreaking, and it really is about how do we change the autocentric culture, the autocentric design of our communities in Montgomery County. This is not the only tool that we have to do it. We have Thrive, we have master plans, we have other strategies. We obviously have Vision Zero, the Safe Streets Act. This is another strategy for the county to use to help to change how we proceed in the future so that our county can be safe to walk and roll and attractive for residents to be able to walk and roll throughout the county regardless of what type of community they live in.
Excellent.
I hope that covers it.
Your memory is spot on, so thank you. Exactly, and I think for colleagues, that is the best way to think about this and all of the decisions that we're going to make. There's an aspirational quality and a practical quality, and we're going to be maneuvering between those two. Councilmember Stewart.
Great, thank you. So I think Councilmember Friesen probably said much of what I wanted to say, but I will just say during our T&E committee meeting, we did discuss this quite a bit, even got down to like what's the difference between the words at a crosswalk versus in, and I would be comfortable if we wanted to change this from pursue to consider. I think it's a conversation we need to have because we need to change behaviors. We just had a proclamation on walking and rolling to school, and I can tell you, as a mother, when my children were walking to school, one of the hardest things to teach them was to cross at a crosswalk when there was not a crossing guard. Because when they were little and had those huge backpacks on them, telling them when it was safe to actually enter into the crosswalk and teaching that behavior was actually really difficult. And so, I understand this may not be a simple law to change and there are a lot of implications to it, but as Director Stern just said, of what we want this master plan to be and the conversations we want it to us to continue having, that is why I voted for this to stay in the master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm not supportive of the committee recommendation as it currently exists. I certainly am okay by changing the word to consider. Candidly, and I think we have to have this conversation, I think this could be a much less safe situation. If the it's not illegal to stand on the sidewalk at where someone might be crossing. And for a driver to have to consider to stop at each spot where this could be, I don't see how they can do it, and especially if it's a multi-lane road where maybe the lane closest to the curb, they see somebody standing there, but the next lane over, because of the sight distance where that driver is, they don't see somebody standing there. The car blocks their view. I just believe this is, I understand why we're having the discussion. I have no problem having another discussion on it, but I don't believe this is safe the way it's written now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fana Gonzalez.
Very quickly, I think Council Vice President Fritzen touched on the very points that I wanted to mention. When I was on the planning board back in 2019, that's when we kicked off the pedestrian master plan, and the whole reason for initiating this plan was, at the end of the day, to change the cultural ways that we see this, how we are mobilizing ourselves. So it is, at the end of the day, a cultural change that we're trying to seek here. And taking care of each other, protecting each other, that's what it is. I agree with the committee recommendation. As a mom, you know, I cannot tell you how many times I had to wait on the crosswalk with my kids when they bike to school. We gotta cross our cola. Cars see us there, they do not stop. And it's not gonna be until like we start finding, giving citations to people, they will realize that there's gonna be a penalty behind this. And it will probably take a generation, to be honest with you, to make this happen, but it has to happen now, because people are getting killed, literally. Folks, people are getting killed crossing our streets because we don't care. We want to rush everywhere. So it is a tough. I don't see it as a tough at all. I think I'm just gonna go for it. But I guess it is tough for some people, but not for me. So anyway, I do recommend the committee. I will support the committee's recommendation, and I want to thank the T&E committee for their great work. I did watch the sessions, and I was very proud of all of you. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the conversation, and as Councilmember Stewart was speaking, there's nothing I fear more than my child being hit by a car, like whether it's in a parking lot or back. I mean, I try not to fear things, but I fear that, and it is. I know I'm not alone. It's a lot. It's a huge issue for anybody getting struck, but just your young child. So, I agree we want to change the behavior. The issue that I just want to say is there's a lot of reasons why the behavior is bad and why the built environment is bad. And there's, it's obviously, and I'm not suggesting anyone is saying this, but it's not just the driver, right? It's the fact that we don't have protected crossways. It's the way our streets are designed. It's all the other things that we work on. And we do ask our drivers, we have added. There's also, at the same time, a history in this country of adding laws, well-intentioned laws, particularly to our traffic in codes, that are enforced disproportionately, right? I have legislation before this council to address that issue, right? And so I think we have to be aware of the history of how well-intentioned policies and laws that have been added over, decades have been added and used and enforced disproportionately, and hold at the same time that we want this goal of changing behavior. And the question is, how do we layer, I'll use my Swiss cheese analysis again, how do we layer enough things to get the desired outcome of someone wanting to stop? I know sometimes when I approach these crosswalks and I stop, I often turn my flashers on because I don't want someone to run in the behind of me, because they're like, why are you stopping? Or you get honked, or like, why are you stopping? That we do want to change that behavior. However, we also want to realize there's a lot of things that are being balanced with these drivers. The inequitable enforcement of traffic laws in particular, or for communities of color and others. And I just think that's something. So all that being said, I would see if the committee, I would want to suggest that we move, I would move that we change the word from pursue to consider, in trying to balance this. And I do think it should be considered, but I want it to be considered along with all these other things that can make the built environment more safe and also change behavior, like the hawk signals, like the protected crosswalks, like the complete streets we're trying to build in every master plan we do. Go down the list, changing speed limits, all the things we're trying to do. So I would move that we change it from pursue to consider.
Okay, Councilmember Jawando wants to change the word pursue to consider. Is there a second?
I'll say.
Second by Councilmember Katz. Councilmember Mink.
I will withdraw because I agree with Councilmember Jawando.
Okay. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. I just wanted to chime in. As with everything transportation, it was a very long conversation that we had. Yeah, and many of the things that we talked about, we're talking about now, we talked about then. I agree with changing pursue to consider. We talked a lot about verbs, and particularly the verbs that we use when we're talking about state legislation, because we don't have control over that. And for me, one of the pursue means that is that was going to go on our state legislative list as a priority, and then we were going to pursue that, given that we have so many other things that we pursue at the state level. So I think I appreciate the word consider, and then also enforcement. One of the things that came up is we have many people who don't stop when there are people in the crosswalk. So we're going to add another law that we're not enforcing the first law, and so that created some concerns with me. And then particularly the safety. The reason that I voted in favor, that I agreed with the DOT and with council staff, was from the safety issue. The issue that Councilmember Katz talked about on a four-lane road. For instance, if you're closest to the curb, you stop. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person next to you is going to stop, or that the person behind you is not going to swing around and go around you. Now that can happen when someone's in the crosswalk as well. So anyway, I just wanted to chime in as to why I voted, that I didn't vote with my colleagues on that. I would support the consider modifications to the state law. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a vote. Let me just chime in and say, pick up where Councilmember Balcom left off in referencing or alluding to the example that Councilmember Katz gave, where cars in various lanes are not stopping. That is not exclusive to this proposal. That is happening now, and that happens to me every single time I try to cross Colesville Road. I play Frogger in trying to cross the street safely, and it was only after my very first day of taking the bus and walking to get here to the council that at Indian Spring and Hastings a light was finally installed 4 years later. Just to put some real time and space into this conversation, it took 4 years to implement a pedestrian safety mechanism only after SHA saw me complain about it going to the first day of council last session. And so even when I'm standing trying to cross the street, cars are not stopping, and the minute I step foot into that first lane, I don't know if the second lane and third lane and then the opposite side traffic is going to stop. That is real. And the reason there's a law that says you yield to pedestrians is because we're trying to change that mindset. And to me, this recommendation, and let's keep in mind, it is simply a recommendation, is another step towards making our roads safer. And we can only even adopt that in coordination with our state leaders and with SHA. And I think it is important to add that to the dialogue. And so I will not be supporting the amendment, but I do understand where colleagues are coming from. Not seeing any other colleagues in the queue, there is an amendment to change the word pursue to consider. All those in favor of that amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is 8. All those opposed? And 3. So that change is made 8-3. And with that, we will adopt this key action without objection. Okay.
All right, thank you. We're now on page 6. This is actually a pretty minor one. Their recommendation B4F is to develop and implement a comprehensive pedestrian wayfinding system for the county. In the narrative, it talks about the fact that there's already a comprehensive bikeway wayfinding system being developed by the planning department, DOT points out that, hey, wait a minute, we're working on this too. So the language that's been recommended to be changed both by DOT and planning staff is to say a similar effort to develop bikeway wayfinding is under development jointly by the planning department and MCDOT. And the committee agreed with that.
Without objection.
Okay, the next one item was the one we had the most correspondence on by far, which is the recommendation of the plan is to make the open parkways that are currently operating along Beach Drive and Slugger Creek Parkway permanent. And just to, again, summarize what the situation there now is that on Beach Drive between Knowles Avenue and Connecticut Avenue, on Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays during the summer, the road is closed between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., and in the winter it's closed from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. On Sligo Creek Parkway, it's the same thing, except that the restrictions also apply on Fridays. Councilmember Albornoz wrote in basically recommending that this item not be in the plan and that be left to the Parks Department to decide on a case-by-case basis what should happen and not have it memorialized in the plan. And ultimately the committee unanimously agreed with that. So the committee's recommendation is to remove this key action from the plan, recognizing that it's still an issue and it will be made basically a decision by the Parks Department, presumably in consultation with this guy.
Sure. I'll share with colleagues as well that I appreciate Councilmember Albornoz for attending the session and putting forth this recommendation. I support keeping those two roads closed on weekends and holidays. I think the community benefits greatly from them, and as we went through the pandemic, we made a commitment to rethink our roads and how they could be better utilized by everybody, and this was one of the things that we came up with. But I ultimately supported the recommendation, as did the entire committee did, because I think it's really important to recognize that the Parks Department controls those roads, and this is a recommendation from the Planning Department, and both of whom are overseen by the Planning Board. So if anything were to happen, one way or the other, it would only be with the support of the Planning Board. And given the Planning Board has already indicated they support this Planning Board as of now, the continuation of this program, I feel that it should be continued to be left up to them. And should they change their mind, I'm sure we will have a T&E committee hearing to better learn why they have reversed course, but I'm comfortable leaving it up to them to stay the course. Not seeing any other comments? You're good? Without objection.
Okay. We seem to be alternating between minor ones and major ones. So this is a minor one. Near the top, page 7, the recommendation is to fund off-site pedestrian bicycle access improvements to transit stations as part of the main capital project or through a parallel effort. DOT was concerned about the definition. There was no definition for off-site, and so the planning staff had recommended adding the sentence, off-site is defined as improvements that are not directly connected to the transit station, but fill a gap within the transit station walkshed. The transit station walkshed should be defined as part of the initial planning and design process for the capital project. DOT agrees with that, and the committee agreed with it as well. In addition to that, in the work session, DOT had recommended that the first word in that key action, rather than saying fund off-site pedestrian bicycle access, to basically say instead include off-site pedestrian bicycle access. So those are the two changes that the committee's unanimously recommending.
Without objection.
Okay, the next one had quite a bit of discussion, which was the recommendation is to develop an approach to achieving increased county control over state highways, beginning in downtowns and town centers and along Thrive growth corridors. Initially, the plan had recommended, I think in an earlier draft, that the county take over state highways in these areas, and that was modified to basically develop an approach to achieving the county's goals here. A lot of discussion about this, about whether or not transfers should really happen or not, the fiscal impacts of that, the basic responsibilities of the state government versus the county government, and ultimately the committee asked the staffs, the planning staff and DOT staff, to come back with a recommendation for a new text, and boy did they. So everything you see there on the bottom page 7 and all of page 8 and top of page 9 is what would replace what's in recommendation B10 and the key actions involved. Just to summarize, basically, there would be two key actions. B10A is written in a way which basically says that we would like to see the state adopt our policies, whether it's the Complete Streets Plan, the Safe Streets Act, the Climate Action Plan, anything having to do with our roads. And there's a second item here, which actually the committee didn't talk about, but it's been a concern of DOT, is that State Highway be more expeditious in terms of reviewing public and private partnerships that affect these roads, because they've been notoriously slow in this regards, and that's held up a lot of potential pedestrian improvements. And so the two staffs are recommending all of that language that I just mentioned, bottom page 7, all of page 8, and top of page 9. Now, the committee didn't review the specific language in the committee. Obviously, they asked the DOT to do it, so I'm not sure if that needs a committee.
I was just going to turn it over to Director Conklin or Mr. Paler if they wanted to expand.
Well, sure. I mean, there was a substantial amount of discussion of this in committee, and we talked about how many times, either in DOT, the planning department, or others, get frustrated with not being able to implement the type of control and changes that we might like to see on state highways. But at the same time, our partners in the State Highway Administration have significantly more resources than we do as a local government, and having state services in the county is a vital part of us delivering all of our services for our residents. So we were coming to this, although we might be frustrated from time to time with the action of the state and things we'd like to see happen. At the same time, we will do better by engaging them as partners and trying to change, not statewide, but change their perspective on Montgomery County, how these facilities should be managed or changed. So we worked with the planning department on the language you see before you, which was stepping away from saying, we know better, we'll take it away and do it ourselves, to let's work with you to get the outcomes we want to see on the facilities, and at the same time try to accelerate that work, whether the county's doing it, the state's doing it, or it's being done through a developer or in a private project that's implementing changes to state highway.
Thank you. Mr. Sartori.
Sure. For the record, Jason Sartori, Chief of Countywide Planning and Policy at the Planning Department. I just want to clarify, I think that we actually drafted this in between the two T&E committee work sessions, and that the committee did see this and vote on this during the second work session. So my notes show that it was a 3-0 approval on this language. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, that is correct. And I, again, appreciate the way we're trying to move forward, and as Director Conklin noted also, SHA has made great strides. They need to continue doing more, and I just want to extend our shared appreciation for all of our colleagues in the General Assembly who continue advocating for safer streets and pushing SHA to adopt more of our local laws or adapt to the situations on the ground as they are unique here in Montgomery County. Not seeing any comments from colleagues, we will accept this without objection.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for the correction. You're absolutely right. Top of page 9, next key action was to eliminate breakaway traffic signal and other poles in the immediate vicinity of transit stops and other areas of significant pedestrian activity. Breakaway poles are there for if a car hits it or a truck hits it, the pole it's not as much of a fixed object, and so it means less damage, injury, fatalities to drivers. The concern that the planning board had was that if there is a breakaway pole, the pole itself might become a projectile and endanger a pedestrian or bicyclist in the vicinity. Maybe Chris can talk about this, but basically he was pointing out in the session that really hasn't really happened anywhere in terms of damage to or hurt to pedestrians or bicyclists, and that there are some certain federal and state laws that require certain types of poles to be built. It's not it's something that we have entirely control over, and so it should be more context sensitive. So, and the department has the ability to decide which poles within state and federal law, which poles need to be breakaway and which maybe are not. So given that he has that authority, the committee recommended deleting this item from the plan.
Without objection.
Okay, next one is relatively minor. The plan recommends construct the pedestrian clear zone using Portland cement concrete in line with DOT's design standards and specifications. In the text, it talks about the problem with brick sidewalks, but also pavers and other materials. DOT in their comments says, well, there's nothing particularly wrong with pavers and other materials. They do agree that bricks cause a problem. And so the language that's been recommended is to change the first sentence of the narrative to say, instead, brick sidewalks present more tripping and slippage hazards than Portland cement, concrete, pavers, and some other materials.
Without objection.
Okay. The next recommendation was to, bottom page 9, charge parking lot district fees at market rates and use the added proceeds to fund pedestrian, bikeway, and safety projects nearby. We pointed out that the parking lot districts are not always in the great financial shape, that there are a lot of draws on the PLDs right now already in terms of just the basic maintenance and rehabilitation of their facilities, as well as a fairly large contribution that they make to the urban district funds. And then we're going to have a work session in T&E committee in a couple of weeks over the sort of a deep dive into the PLDs and their financial situation. Also pointed out is that the rates that are being charged may or may not already be the market rates, because if the problem is if you raise the rates too high, maybe even at market rates, we may end up with less revenue than what we're getting already. So the recommendation of the committee is to delete this action from the plan.
Thank you for that, Dr. Orlin. So the committee deleted this recommendation not because it's not a worthy recommendation and not not worthy of these resources, but in fact because the T&E committee is having a work session, a committee session on the parking lot districts, and I believe there will probably be another joint committee with economic development to talk about how the parking lot districts already provide funding for the urban districts. And so the other way of saying that is we're having this conversation now, and this recommendation will absolutely be part of that conversation. But to put it into this master plan now is a little premature. So,
Okay.
without objection, we'll...
Okay, the recommendations on pages 10 or 11 all have to do with the designation of certain areas as either downtowns or town centers as interim conditions under the law that you passed earlier this year, and how those interim recommendations might change. The first one is, the top of page 10, is the Downtown Life Science Center in the Great Seneca area. The plan recommends keeping it as a downtown designation. I should say the difference between downtown and town center has to do with the design of the streets in those areas. They're different. The downtown ones are if anything more pedestrian safe sensitive than the town center ones, although the town center ones are plenty pedestrian sensitive as well. The DOT was thinking that really that area is really more like a town center in terms of its zoning. It was pointed out that that plan is actually under development right now, what's called the Great Seneca Plan Connecting Life and Science, and will be before the council next year. So the committee's recommendation is to add a note to the table in the plan and the maps showing these areas, saying that the downtown interim designation and the boundaries of the life of this area, and the designation boundary for the Treville University of Shady Grove Town Center, which is adjacent to it, will be reviewed when the council takes up that plan next year. So basically confirms what the draft plan is saying, but noting that it's going to get reevaluated within the year.
Correct. We'll accept that objection.
I'll just keep rolling here. The next one is the Downtown Life Science Center at White Oak, the FDA Village. Here, DOT made the same comment. They think it's really not a downtown. They think it's a town center. Planning Board says no, it's a very large area. A lot of development is going to be happening there. And so the committee concurred with the Planning Board to keep that as a downtown. Ditto for Rock Spring. The Planning Board recommended that it be continue as a downtown. DOT believes that zoning is really more associated with being a town center, but the committee concurred with the Planning Board on that. The 16th Street, here's just the opposite. This is the area around the future Purple Line station, just north of downtown Silver Spring. Here, it's recommended in the plan, we're actually in the law, this being a town center designation. DOT feels that it's more of a downtown. But here again, the committee agreed with the Planning Board that it should be continue as a town center. The Briggs, and I'll just keep going unless someone interrupts me. Briggs Cheney Town Center, Similar to the one having to do with the Great Seneca area, this is one where you're going to be taking up really the next couple months. You're going to have a public hearing tomorrow night, and you're going to have work sessions in the PHP committee through all of October. The committee the law basically has this as a actually there's no distinction about what type of area. It's all agreed it's a town center. The question has to do with the boundary, and DOT is recommending a larger boundary. And in fact, the plan's recommended boundary is different than what is in the Briggs-Cheney Fairland proposed plan. So there needs to be some reconciliation there going on. And so the idea here is, again, similar language saying that we're keeping the boundary where it is now, but it's going to be reconsidered as part of this upcoming plan. And finally, the Four Corners Town Center. This is similar to the 16th Street one, where the committee is recommending. I'm sorry, it's not true. DOT is recommending including Blair High School in the boundary of the Four Corners area. There is a plan under development at the planning board now called the University Boulevard Corridor Plan, which is I think a little further off in time. Maybe that's going to come forward in 2025 or so. But is it 2024? Is it 2024? It's soon. Okay. And so the idea again is put language in the plan saying it's going to be reevaluated at that point.
We will accept all of those regional areas without objection.
Okay, then there's a few comments from the city of Gaithersburg. Everything up to now has been comments from DOT or on the Vision Zero coordinator. This is from Gaithersburg. There are two recommendations. One says develop legislation to create a new class of commercial driver's licenses required to operate vehicles with identified pedestrian safety and visibility issues. The committee is recommending changing that to consider developing legislation rather than develop recommendations. And again, it's more a matter of let's study it some more, decide whether or not this is something we really want or not. And then the second one is to require, in the draft says, require anyone who works in the public right-of-way to take ADA training and maintain ADA certification, implement policy penalties for observed ADA noncompliance during construction or maintenance that deviates from what was approved on right-of-way permits. Approved right-of-way permits should be easily accessible so members of the public can understand what has been approved. The T&E committee basically is, again, putting this in the context of considering this rather than absolutely requiring it. Again, this would would require changes to state law. And there would also be a change in that it's not just anyone who works in the public right-of-way, but consider requiring any construction worker who works in the public right-of-way, because there are others who are in the public right-of-way now and then as well, but construction workers are the ones who are there regularly. And then the final recommendation from the city was to consider potential legislation to tie vehicle registration fees to, say, vehicle design. Because this was in the mode of consider rather than just do it, the committee recommended approval of that recommendation in the draft plan.
Thank you. Vice President Friedson has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm comfortable with moving forward with the changes as the committee has noted, but I did just want to speak to how important the commercial license piece is. Yesterday, the driver who struck Sarah Langenkamp was charged in court. Her husband, Dan Langenkamp, was there. I've been in touch with him throughout the day today. And one of the main issues there is the penalty is extremely limited. The state law to address these issues, that was the issue, just to recall for colleagues, mom returning home from back to school night on her bike on River Road. She was riding where she was supposed to in a designated bike lane on a state road, and a large commercial truck turned into an entrance and hit her and basically struck her, dragged her, and killed her on site. I won't go into more details than that, but obviously for her family, for her children, for those that she's left behind, a horrible situation. She left Ukraine. They were literally evacuated from Ukraine, leaving a war area, only to come to Bethesda, Maryland, to return from a back-to-school night where she was killed. And the reality, as Dan, her husband, and those who are close to her are looking at the changes that are needed to prevent tragedies like hers and like their family's experience from happening again, is that there are too few tools in the disposal. And one of them would be this very issue where clearly you have an individual driving a deadly commercial vehicle which did not take the necessary safety steps to prevent a tragedy. Yes, there was a blind spot, but shortly before there was a blind spot, it was easy to have seen if the appropriate measures were taken. So we're slightly adjusting the language here, softening it, I would say, but I don't want to downplay the importance of the issue, and given the timing, I thought it was important to humanize this issue of just how important it is and how strongly I know all of us feel about addressing these recommendations and that one in particular. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. We will accept all these without objection.
Okay, the next section has to do with recommendations from council members themselves. The first one was from Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez, who was basically pointing out the importance of economic development in pedestrian accesses to economic development. So a sentence has been added to the introduction of Goal 1 to say improved pedestrian access is also vital to promote economic development in the county. And the committee agreed with that.
Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
Just to say thank you so much for taking this into consideration, because at the end of the day, when we talk about pedestrian safety, people don't think about businesses. This is great for businesses. Having access for people to walk and bike and roll to those businesses is key, and this is what the goal it is. So thank you for that. That's all.
Thank you for your suggestion, which we will adopt without objection.
A couple of comments from recommendations from Councilmember Stewart. The first had to do with the lack of funding for stump removal, and this has to do with the tree planting recommendation. Basically, after some discussion, the committee asked staffs to come up with specific language to address that, and so basically what we're saying now is that key action B6B on page 86, revise the text that reads, eliminating barriers to replacing trees that have been removed, to be amended to read, eliminating barriers to replacing street trees, such as delays in stump removal. The next comment has to do with...
Vice President Friedson has a comment.
Sorry.
Yeah, just quickly on the stump removal, this is very important. I just got a notification from a constituent last week. The message that they received back from county government, literally the message was shared with me. The timeline used to be 3 years. I think the new timeline is 6 to 7 years, if I'm not mistaken, from that message. And the part of the message was, if you'd like to do it yourself, you can request permission from us to go into our right-of-way to spend your own money to do it. Obviously, those with means can do it. Those without means are out of luck. And you have to actually go through an administrative process to do the county's job for the county. So, we're approaching this from a different angle here, but I would be hesitant for us to discuss tree stump removal without just saying how inadequate and absurd that is. I think we should all be embarrassed by that. It's an example of us wanting to do the big things in local government. We have to get the little things right. To prove to residents that we can, do our job, and we're not doing our job here. So I just thought it was important to note that. I didn't want to gloss over it. Yes, this is important language, but we have to address the underlying issue that we are not handling the core functions of our job in the way that they need to be done to get the faith of the community to make some of these larger and bigger policy issues and to get them done. Yield back to you, Mr. President.
I'm looking at Director Conklin as you all are developing the FY24 budget. Keep this in mind.
I'm happy to speak to some context for that, and I recognize that is a ridiculous time frame, and at least we are giving the resident the opportunity if they so choose, but that's also, I agree, a difficult situation to put a resident in. In our budget, our operating budget, the stump removal is always the very first thing that gets cut in times of fiscal constraint. We can always look at reprioritizing where we make those adjustments when we are strained in our budgets to see if that program can be reinvigorated and reaccelerated. But that's the area that's been cut because it's not a direct safety implication of the stump being there, and most of the other programs it competes with have direct safety impacts. But you're absolutely right that that is a very difficult position to put a resident in, and we try to deal with the stump with a tree replacement when we're doing tree replacement. Sometimes we're able to do that, sometimes not, but the stump backlog is extraordinary, and that program is woefully underfunded.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much. I think nothing would be more frustrating when one of our residents calls 311 and they say, you know, there's a stump, and they say, we're going to get back to you in 6 or 7 years. At first you think it's funny, and then you realize, unfortunately, it's not. So I think we need to really redirect. I've said we should probably get out of the stump removal business. If that's our answer, we shouldn't get out of it, by the way. But if that's our answer, because it's just ridiculous. It's not service. So we do have to address it during this next budget. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, Director Copeland, and I know sometimes when things are not put in the context of what the implications are, those are the first things, right, that get cut. And when you think of stump removal without actually thinking about the broader implications of what it could be a barrier to or the message it sends to a resident, I understand how it can get cut. My intent here was to add it to the pedestrian master plan so that we saw it as linked to our maintenance of our tree canopy, and also to help elevate this conversation so that we are all having it right now, so that when you come back to us during the budget, we will remember the importance of making sure that we talk about stump removal and how we're funding it. So thank you.
Thank you for that recommendation, which we'll accept without objection.
Okay, the next recommendation from Councilmember Stewart has to do with further references to benchmarking progress in the plan. Again, the committee agreed with the general thrust of this and asked staff to develop text. And the staff recommendation is what's there indented. The Montgomery County Planning Department will track progress in implementing the pedestrian master plan's vision using a biennial monitoring report and interactive website. The two tools will document how the county is implementing the plan recommendations and striving to achieve the plan's performance and measure targets. So that's the staff's recommendation in response to Councilmember Stewart's recommendation.
Councilmember Stewart, you're good? Okay.
Okay. Then the committee also had a lengthy discourse about key action 8P8B, which is to increase in-person enforcement activities. Again, it asked the staff to develop recommendations to reflect its point of view, which was pretty wide, actually. And so the language there is at the top of page 13. I'll just read it quickly. Consider developing strategies for equitable in-person traffic enforcement activities. While there are many benefits to automated enforcement, it is not present everywhere. Traffic infractions take place and cannot detect certain types of infractions. Of particular relevance to this master plan are violations of the pedestrian right-of-way, stop sign compliance, and other pedestrian vehicle conflicts. Strategies should be developed to ensure this life-saving enforcement activity takes place and occurs in a fair and equitable fashion.
Councilmember Stewart.
I just want to thank the planning department staff for this new language and taking the emphasis off of the in-person focus on this. And I think as Councilmember Jawando raised as we were talking earlier, you know, we're not just having conversations here, but as I said in committee, there are conversations happening nationally about how we do traffic enforcement. And I think this language is broad enough to talk about looking at strategies and doing so in a fair and equitable fashion. And I'm fine with this moving forward. Thank you.
I appreciate Councilmember Stewart for raising this at the work session. It was the very last item, but an extremely important one, and I appreciate the language that staff has come up with, recognizing that it is a balancing act and we want to be fair and equitable with enforcement of all our laws. So I support that as well, without objection.
Okay, Councilmember Balcom recommended splitting item P1D, which you'll find on top of page 102 of the plan, into two separate key actions. P1D has developed legislation to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety by implementing a knowledge test requirement as part of the driver license renewal process. But she pointed out that the last sentence in the narrative says that each year the county should notify all county households identifying changes to traffic rules and regulations that have taken effect over the past year. And she had recommended splitting that out as a separate key action. And so the staff was asked to develop a narrative for that, and the narrative is over time rules and regulations governing the transportation system change and the new roadway striping, signage, facilities, and signalization approaches are implemented to help ensure county residents are aware of these changes and to improve safety for everyone using the transportation system. Annual notice of these changes should be provided. And the committee agreed with splitting it out into that separate key action and approving that. Well, this language is new to you, but this is the sense of where that recommendation was from.
Councilmember Balcom?
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. This works for me, and it's just proof that we read every single word in this document, so thank you.
Thank you, and we'll accept that without objection.
The next is in a recommendation. This is what I referred to at the very beginning of this discussion. Councilmember Balcom recommends that the council have a subsequent discussion on which of the key actions to prioritize in the plan, and then that will something that will happen against whether it's a separate session that you have on this item or it's strictly something you take up in next year's operating budget and CIP and in subsequent years as well. Finally, she asked for a review of the consistency, this is Councilmember Balcom again, for where the county council is identified as the lead versus where they're not identified as a lead. And in doing the review, the staff's found one more item where there was maybe one where the council shouldn't be involved, which is that in reviewing the plan, staffs believe the council should be added, or actually added to the lead, should be added as a lead for key action B7G, which is to include off-site pedestrian and bicycle access improvements to transit stations as part of the main capital project or through a parallel effort. So the recommendation from staff in response to what Councilmember Balcom was asking is that the council be added as a lead for that particular key action.
Appreciate Councilmember Balcom with her eagle eye looking at what actions are incumbent upon us to take in this big document. There's a lot of different moving parts and pieces, and we know what role we have to play. So thank you, Director Conklin.
I just wanted to mention for a couple of the new items that the language hadn't been discussed in committee. There's a very strong relationship to the Vision Zero action plan. So as these prioritization tools and reporting tools are being developed with the planning department, I just want to highlight to the council that we need to be sure that we coordinate those updates and those prioritization activities with the Vision Zero action plans so that we're not either duplicating efforts or diluting efforts that are already in the county's plans.
And we will receive that Vision Zero update later this winter. So thank you for teeing that up.
Finally, there's a couple pages of recommendations from council staff that we're bringing up. The first one is the recommendation to amend the residential parking permit program guidelines to allow removal of on-street parking in front of homes to create space to build a sidewalk or bikeway in the street. I pointed out that could be problematical because the reason for that program is to provide space for residents to actually park in front or near the front of their house and to take away those spaces to allow a bikeway or sidewalk to be built in the street space would make it very, very difficult for people to park just right where they live. When the alternative usually exists where the bikeway or sidewalk could be built on the right-of-way or even in private property if they need to take it adjacent to the right-of-way. What the DOT pointed out is that they have the authority to do this anyway. They probably wouldn't use it very often at all. It's like a last resort. And so as a result of that, the committee is recommending deleting this action from the plan.
Without objection.
And then the next item is sort of similar. The plan is recommending affirming that the county can remove curbside electric vehicle charging stations to allow a planned sidewalk or bikeway to be built in the street rather than parallel to it at a higher cost. The issue here is, which is the higher priority? Is it providing spaces for EVs, which is a very important part of the climate action plan, or to make a sidewalk or bikeway less expensive to build in the area? And again, DOT, Mr. Conklin, Director Conklin pointed out that DOT has the authority to make those kinds of decisions now anyway. They probably wouldn't in most cases, but if it had to, they might recommend taking out an EV station, but it really depends on the context. And rather than having the plan itself explicitly say that it could happen, basically just let it happen in odd cases here and there.
So let me just pick up on that real quick. Director Conklin, when a homeowner or a resident applies for a permit to install an EV charging station in the right-of-way, presumably because they don't have a driveway, let's just make that presumption, are they given notice that that might change?
Yes, they have to go through the Department of Permitting Services and receive a permit to install the device in the right-of-way. Again, I don't have the permit requirements in front of me, but they are required to be able to remove that device and if it's needed or if it's in the way of other future improvements. Again, don't expect that to be a common occurrence.
I agree that I don't expect it to be a common occurrence, but isn't it the same kind of policy that we'd be setting when people are redoing their driveway? That the lower part of the driveway sometimes is done less well than the top portion because they might expect it to be changed and a sidewalk to come through.
I'm not sure I follow the analogy directly, but if a private party wants to make alterations to the right-of-way, they need to obtain a permit for that, and it doesn't. Their having a permit for that obstruction does not generally change our ability to change the right-of-way again later to meet public purpose.
Fair point. Thank you. I'm not seeing any comment. We'll accept this without objection.
Okay, the next recommendation is key action B4E, which is create a grid of streets and alleys along transit corridors with block sizes based on protected crossing spacing standards and the complete streets design guidelines. Actually, if one were literally to do this, this actually contributes 3/4 of the cost of this plan. Just this one item alone. The idea of basically taking a block where it's already developed and to actually proactively change it so that there are smaller blocks. The committee recognized that really this is something that would happen, if it happens at all, would happen as part of redevelopment. If the developer takes control of a super block, he or she may decide to redevelop it with smaller blocks within it. And so the language has been changed by the committee to say, promote redevelopment to create a grid of streets and alleys along transit corridors, etc.
Without objection.
Okay. The next item is to offer monetary support to HOAs and condominium associations and commercial properties to provide pedestrian connections through their property and reconfiguring parking lots to be more pedestrian friendly. The committee's recommendation is to, rather than saying to affirmatively offer this monetary support, to consider a program with financial and technical support to HOAs and condominium associations to do this.
I just want to take a moment to expand upon this. It was as we talked earlier this morning about rebates and incentivizing people to do the right thing. In this case, there are HOAs and other common ownership communities that sometimes are an impediment to creating safer streets. And if I could turn to somebody at planning just to elaborate a little bit about how big of a problem this is.
Sure. Over the course of developing this plan, we developed our pedestrian level of comfort analysis, which looked at comfort and connectivity across the entire county. And I think one of the interesting and even concerning things that we identified is that in looking at access to local and regional destinations using the pedestrian network, common ownership communities are often sort of barriers that exist for people living within those communities and who would need to travel through those communities to directly access transit and other amenities in the area. So sort of the impetus for this, understanding that as a planning department, if something were to redevelop, we would have opportunities to provide increased pedestrian connectivity. But if that's not the case, there aren't a lot of tools that we have. So incentives to encourage the connection of these communities, to provide connections between the community and the amenities and through the community to allow other people not living in the communities to access amenities is important.
If I could just add very briefly, since the Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan briefing will be coming up, this is also an issue that was identified in that plan as well.
Great. Without objection.
One latter point on this particular recommendation, the DOT had been listed as the lead on this. They pointed out this is really not their bailiwick, and so the committee recommends instead that the lead be the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, as well as the Commission on Common Ownership Communities.
Yes.
Okay. The very last one in the packet, at least, has to do with the recommendation for a new general tax to support pedestrian improvements. The committee basically decided to recommend deleting this from the plan, but Councilmember Stewart's recommendation to add a sentence to the executive summary of the plan saying creative funding strategies and dedicated revenue sources may be helpful in implementing the plan's recommendations, including potential voter-approved taxation, vehicle property tax on vehicles above a certain weight, surplus public parking revenue, and others.
Can you say one more time what the committee decided to do?
Yeah, in the middle of page 15, to add a sentence in the executive summary, which reads as follows: creative funding strategies and dedicated revenue sources may be helpful in implementing the plan's recommendations, including potential voter-approved taxation, vehicle property tax on vehicles above a certain weight, surplus public parking revenue, and others.
And this is in replacement of what?
Sorry?
This replaces what?
This is an additional sentence that would be added to the executive summary, but the explicit key action, F1B, which says a new general tax to support pedestrian improvements, which then lists a whole set of possible recommendations, would come out entirely.
Yes. Okay. Recognizing that doing everything that's required will require a lot of resources. The committee did not want to be constrained by the recommendation on how to generate those resources. And so I appreciate Councilmember Stewart for adding this language, just putting at the front of our mind that if we want to make our streets safer and enact these more than 100 ideas and recommendations, we will have to pay for it somehow. And that's what this is in recognition of. Vice President Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to Councilmember Stewart for putting this forward. I'd personally be more comfortable. We kept this a little bit more open-ended. I think it was intended to be open-ended, but talking about creative funding strategies and dedicated revenue sources, and just end the sentence before including, keep it open-ended, or even including potential voter-approved revenue sources, period. That, because this opens up a number of what could be pretty controversial issues that are worth discussing. But for instance, public parking revenue, parking lot districts. There's a lot of conversations happening right now at the council. They're very complicated. There are a lot of broader implications, fiscally, economic development wise, and otherwise to that. So my personal preference would be to keep this a little bit more high level personally, but we'll put that out there. Yield back to you, Mr. President. I don't know if Councilmember Stewart has any thoughts on that. Let's hear
Councilmember Stewart's thoughts. Councilmember Stewart.
Yes, thank you, and I appreciate the planning department taking a stab at the language on this. The attempt behind this was because we had deleted action F-1B, and there was some language there in recognition about the fiscal impact of these ideas, was to include some acknowledgement that we're going to have to be creative in finding funding strategies. I'm not necessarily wedded to any of the language here. I think this was the department, and I greatly appreciate them taking the feedback in our last session from last week and drafting this language. So I'm very open to changes here.
Let's hear from Councilmember Balcom, and then we'll go back to Vice President Friedson.
Thank you. So I was going to mention. Sorry. I was going to mention that we can't look at this sentence in a vacuum. We have to look at it from the perspective of the original suggestion was to create a new general tax to support pedestrian improvements. So we were reacting to that and saying that the committee voted 3-0 to remove that general tax, but to address somehow that we need to look at how we're going to fund this. One of the things that we talked about that outside of this plan is the prioritization of how we implement the plan. There are 110 action items. Some of them are really big action items that are going to cost a lot of money. Some of them are small that aren't. So at some point we need to prioritize, and at some point we need to figure out how it would be paid for. So that's kind of the context of where this discussion came from.
Thank you. Vice President Friedson.
Thank you. Appreciate the context. Agree with the general approach here. I'm just suggesting slightly different language, or actually just striking the second piece of this out because it's a little more specific than I'm personally comfortable. So I would move to change the suggestion to creative funding strategies and dedicated revenue sources may be helpful in implementing the plan's recommendations, period.
No second? Second by Councilmember Stewart. All those in favor of that recommendation? And that's unanimous.
Excellent. Unless anybody has something else to say, that is it.
No, there we go.
If I could. Eli Glazier, for the record. So we completed the existing conditions part of this plan in 2020, and that was included as part of the entire master plan. And since 2020, the data we relied on predated 2020. We've updated some of those numbers, and I think we've shared the updated numbers with council staff. And I guess they're just like technical changes to percentages and things in the existing conditions report. So if council is interested in allowing us to, as part of the resolution, to making those changes.
Sure. This is just a work session, so we're amenable to those updates. Great. Well, colleagues, thank you for this good work session. Again, to my T&E colleagues for working on this over the last number of weeks, especially to the planning department for this visionary document that we are all going to have to work together to implement. And I think that is the takeaway from this conversation, that we alone, the council that is, cannot do all of this work. We do not have the authority to do all of this work, but as this plan notes, it is the planning department, it is the transportation department, it is our state level officials, and even as noted, it's Department of Permitting Services, should they be called into action. And we ultimately have to pay for this. And so I'm pleased by this. It as has been noted earlier today, it capstones a number of weeks of talking about road safety and pedestrian safety that this council has prioritized, every single one of us, and there's a lot of work to do moving forward. So kudos to you and your team. Thank you very much for this effort. Director Conklin, same to you and your team. And as always, Dr. Orlin, thank you. So, yeah, well, hold on one sec. Champagne. Give me one sec. So this is just a work session.
Yeah, I think we need maybe a straw vote.
Do we need a straw
on the
vote?
entire
Should we get a straw vote?
It's a straw vote.
Okay. All those in favor of this pedestrian master plan as presented, and that's unanimous.
We
So
hope to have it
it'll come back to us on resolution.
We will.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Kudos to you all. Some of the planning department is going to be staying. And as he has been quietly sitting in the audience, the chair of our planning Commission. Mr. Artie Harris will work his way up. Okay, we are now going to have a briefing on the Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan. Welcome, everyone, and again, a welcome to the chair of our planning board, Mr. Harris, and team. And the planning department is going to provide us with a briefing on the Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan for the public's consideration. There is a public hearing tomorrow, September 27th at 7 p.m. at the East County Community Rec Center. And a Planning, Housing, Parks Committee will hold its first work session on the plan on October 16th. And so with that, I will turn it over to the chair of the PHP Committee, Vice President Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really appreciate it. Very excited to get down into the details of this plan. Just wanted to note, we just took up Pedestrian Master Plan, obviously a huge commitment of the county in terms of our Vision Zero goals, and I think appropriate that we're now taking up the Fairland Briggs Cheney Master Plan, given our real emphasis on East County. Both in Thrive 2050, a real focus on re-emphasizing the eastern portion of the county that was taken out of the growth area of the county and really was underinvested and not focused on nearly as much as we now believe it should have been over the years, and a lot of efforts that have been undertaken by the prior council and continued under this council. So I'm pleased about that. This plan contains the text and supporting maps for a comprehensive amendment to the approved and adopted 1997 Fairland Master Plan. This plan is primarily in Councilmember Mink's district. I'm sure she'll have some comments and thoughts to share as well, but given the emphasis on East County broadly, I know this is important to all of us, and obviously a master plan in an area that we really have been focused on will be of considerable interest to the entire council and certainly to the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. I just wanted to note the tour that we received in early September helped set the stage for our review of this plan. Appreciate the Planning Department leading us on that tour, notwithstanding the air conditioning on the bus, but wanted to thank and appreciate that. It's always good to be in the place where the decisions that we're making actually are occurring, and the impact that it has on the people who live there and who work there and who are impacted on a daily basis. I also want to note, as you just heard from Council President Glass, we have made a real emphasis, and I have shared with Council President Glass at the start of this term as chair of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, that we want to do public hearings, particularly on master plans in the communities that are impacted the most. And this was an intention of the prior council that started with the Veers Mill Quarter master plan, and Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez was there and played a significant role in that. Former Councilmember Navarro really organized that, working with the Planning Department. COVID really took away our ability to do that in many ways, and now we have an opportunity to bring it back, and this is really the first example of us being able to do it tomorrow evening. So very excited about that. I wanted to share that this was not a one-off thing that we're looking to do. This is going to be an intentional effort that we undertake as we take up master plans in communities throughout the county, and I think it's certainly appropriate that we'll be at the East County Community Rec Center tomorrow, and we'll hear directly from residents on their turf in their terms, which I think is very important as part of our public outreach effort. So we'll turn it back to you, Council President, if the district council member has any comments, and I just wanted to provide that framework before we move forward. Thank you.
Terrific framing. I'll turn it over to the district council member, Mink.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you for those remarks, Vice President Friedson. I think they're right on point. I echo everything that you just said, and I really want to express my appreciation to the Planning Department, to the Planning Board, and very much so to the PHP Committee and to the full Council for the focus and attention that has been on East County. It is really important. We are righting inequities of the past, and we're also recognizing the tremendous, tremendous opportunities that we have here in East County. So it was really fantastic to be able to go on that bus tour earlier this month. And, it was very much so not just me. This was a whole council activity. Everyone was engaged. Everyone is very much paying attention to make sure that we do right by the Fairland and Briggs Cheney community and by East County as a whole. So really excited for this briefing. Very much looking forward to the public hearing that we're having tomorrow evening at the East County Community Rec Center, incorporating obviously the voices of the community into these master plans, and especially here in East County is so tremendously important, and really appreciate all the teamwork that has gone into this and that's going to go into this moving forward. Thanks very much.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'll turn it over to the chair of the planning board if you have any comments.
Good afternoon. Thank you and welcome. Artie Harris, chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. Thank you, Council President, Vice President, members of the council, including, as we said, Councilmember Mink, representing the Fairlands Briggs Cheney District, for this opportunity to present this plan to you. It is the first community-focused land use plan after approval and adoption of our new general plan, Thrive Montgomery 2050. This plan seeks to thoughtfully implement the main pillars of the general plan. First of all, which were racial equity, social justice, environmental resilience, and economic competitiveness. The Fairlands Briggs Cheney Master Plan lays out a vision and roadmap toward these desired outcomes through strategies and goals focused on compact, corridor-focused growth and development, complete communities with a greater mix of uses and forms, and particular focus and care placed on integrating and connecting new development and uses with existing communities. People-first transportation and communication networks that better connect people, places, and ideas, promoting housing in all forms, and diversifying and enhancing parks and recreation programming and connections to better serve existing and in future inhabitants of this great community. After decades of intentional anti-growth policies and limited investment along Route US 29 corridor in East County, this is a new vision for the Fairlands Briggs Cheney community, and it will establish the land use and zoning foundation and framework to support economic and physical growth in East County. This plan will complement and embrace the surrounding communities in Burtonsville and White Oak, and seeks to, one, avoid costly infrastructure investments for a single occupancy vehicle interchanges that typically consume a vast amount of public funds, land, and further divide communities, and instead redirect public investment into sensible people-first infrastructure like the flash bus rapid transit system and safe pedestrian and bike networks. Lastly, this plan provides a climate assessment which is designed to assess any long-term climate impacts that may result from the recommendations contained in the plan. Planning staff have provided a robust analysis to accompany the plan, which is largely viewed as positive. And we look forward to future discussions and answering any questions you may have to the report. I'll turn over now to Tanya Stern, Acting Director, and her team to present the full plan. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Tanya Stern, Acting Planning Director with the Planning Department. I think a lot of what I would have said has already been stated by Vice President Friedson, Councilmember Meek, and Planning Board Chair Harris. But I will just re-emphasize 2 points. One is that we are very excited to be at this point with the council to start your review process for this master plan. It is critically important, as has already been stated. This is an area of the county that really was overlooked, and decisions were made to not focus on this part of the county in terms of public and private investments. And so this is our opportunity to both address and redress those inequities and to make sure that we create a new vision that will support the East County and all of its residents in being an attractive and vibrant place for them to live, to work, and to play. And so with that, I will turn it over to our team to walk us through the briefing.
Good.
Thank you, Director Stern. This is Malene Jackson for the record. Thank you so much for having us. Good afternoon, good evening. I am one of several members of our team, but I've been co-leading the Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan since 2021, and I've had the honor and privilege of serving amongst my colleagues here at the Planning Department.
Can I ask you to speak up a little bit?
Sure, sure. So, in anticipation...
I know the issues, yeah.
In anticipation of the public hearing, which we're very much excited for, to hear the feedback of the community. The purpose of this presentation today is just to kind of give you some background context. I will primarily focus on our community engagement outreach strategy and how we kind of derived, and how the planning board really derived the master plan, which they've transmitted to you in June of 2023. So I'm joined by my fellow colleague Clark Larson. He will focus on, primarily the guts of the master plan. Again, I will focus on the engagement outreach strategy and structure. The Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan is an update to the 1997 plan. It establishes an equitable vision for a 5-mile stretch of Columbia Pike, US 29 corridor, adjacent communities for the next 20 years. This is a smaller subset of the 1997 plan. This is our schedule, our process here. I also just want to reiterate and discuss the fact that when we launched the plan, we started off with a spring speaker series, and we launched with our project's website. So I highly encourage you to visit our project's website to view some more detail related to our timeline and our process, view recordings and photos from our engagement and outreach. So this is kind of an example of some of our outreach that we did. Kicking off, we, of course, initiated the plan with some of our more standard and traditional methods of outreach by mailing postcards to stakeholders, which we also collected 300 comments online from a questionnaire. We emailed electronic newsletters and generated emailed newsletters to 500 stakeholders and hand-delivered flyers, as well as posted flyers around the community. However, these efforts, of course, graduated into us taking a more focused and actionable stance and presence in the community. So stage 1, which was the listening sessions, the listening phase of the master plan, we emphasized reaching people where they are and having a stronger presence in the community. For example, we not only canvassed the neighborhoods during our listening sessions, but we also, based on our conversations, hosted a pedestrian audit and 4 different pop-ups throughout the master planning area so that we can conduct in-person interviews. Forging ahead, we also established a very strong social network and working partnerships with community organizations like Everyday Canvassing, Independence Now, Montgomery County Food Council, Health and Human Services by way of the Health and Wellness Committee, religious institutions, local businesses, and we also developed new strategies as a result of our conversations with these groups, and we could not have done it without them, without their support, without their help. During the visioning stage, I'm sorry, one other thing I just wanted to mention is that in our considerations, racial equity, social justice impacts, which were initially not a part of the 1997 plan, we were adamant about reaching people where they were and getting people who don't typically participate in our planning process to have a better stance, be more comfortable with participating in our planning process. So, with the listening session, it was really about, having conversations and listening to people, and then of course that graduated into doing some work, and there was an expectation that when we went out to do visioning work that we would challenge the stakeholders to use their creative intelligence, and using our imaginations together, we can envision a brighter future together. So together we brainstormed ideas and explored meaningful outcomes. And in the summer of 2022, had over 100 participants for our 6 different vision workshops that we hosted. We received more than 600 individual comments and reactions and illustrations from those workshops, and learned a great deal about those, about their concerns. Some of the things that we've heard were support for more active and safe, diverse activity centers that were inclusive and encourage social interactions, with more retail and healthier food systems and dining opportunities. The desire for safer and more accessible bike and pedestrian connections. As we were talking through the pedestrian master plan, we noticed in our conversations with the communities that the connections are a barrier to entry for some folks, depending on your ability, your physical abilities. It was a huge point in this plan. The interest in expanding the BRT and other bus routes and other bus services, and access that had greater access to the entire county and beyond, into Howard County, into Prince George's County, and gave a higher priority to pedestrians and those that were riding along on the bus. And last but not least, the support for more diverse housing and with a range of pricing that complemented existing affordable housing, as in part this area is very well known for some of its market rate affordable housing, but so we were intentional with our zoning recommendations not to totally get rid of those affordable housing units, but to find creative ways to expand not only affordable housing, but market rate housing. In October of 2022, so fast forward a year into our process, and the we hosted a placemaking event in the culmination of 6 months worth of coordination with Better Block, the East County Regional Services Center, and we want to also just pay homage to Drew Bende, who we could not have done it without him, and all of his network of people. Montgomery County Park Department of Transportation, Department of General Services, to host this event, which transformed an existing surface parking lot so that we could envision a brighter future. This is the first time that we hosted a placemaking event concurrently with an active master plan, allowing us to test emerging ideas and supporting the community before we write recommendations is key. This 2-day event brought 1,200 attendees, including but not limited to our Parks Department and some schools, some of the more artistic and entertaining vendors, plus food trucks. I also just wanted to kind of finish up with how we got to the refining and sharing stage of our process. So during the refining stage, and based on all of the comments that we received, not only from stakeholders, but from other agencies, property owners, business owners, we came up with a set of preliminary recommendations and created the working draft. We released the working draft to the public, and the planning board hosted a public hearing and generated comments from the community. The working draft was only approved after hosting a public hearing in 3 work sessions. So in those 3 work sessions, we did have a few comments that came up, and Clark will kind of reemphasize where people were most concerned as we're going through the body of the working draft and the master plan, for which was transmitted in June. So I just want to also just thank you for this opportunity. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve along Clark Larson. I will stay on as long as I possibly can, but I am hopefully giving birth to my first child, and so there may come a time where you might not see me, but I did want to just acknowledge the fact that I have thoroughly enjoyed working for this most deserving community. Thank you. I'm passing it on to Clark.
Might happen at the same time, the birthing of the master plan.
It would be a
and the new family
milestone,
member.
yes, indeed.
Clark Larson with Montgomery Planning, again, as Molly said, co-leaders of the master plan update. I'll continue with our prepared remarks in hopes of living up to the title of this item, to keep it brief. I want to leave time for you all to have a discussion and ask any questions you may have of us. The Planning Board draft of the Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan embraces the goals of Thrive 2050. As our chair mentioned earlier, this is the first major land use plan that's coming before you after the adoption of this general plan for the county, because it focuses on creation of complete communities in an equitable manner that support compact growth along the US 29 corridor. The draft plan recommends public and private investment that's either lacking or is incomplete in this area of the county to support greater economic health and community well-being. The plan also focuses on increasing connections between the built and natural environments that enhance the community health through better access to public spaces, healthy food, and resilient community facilities. The master plan vision seeks to answer the question of what the Fairland Briggs Cheney community will be like in over the next 20 years, envisioning an evolving and connected suburban corridor with compact activity centers that support a healthy local economy and multicultural community that is socially connected and environmentally resilient. The plan graphic you see on the right here on the slide is also in the plan. This indicates the primary elements of the plan's recommendations centered around the foundational principles of racial equity and social justice. Sort of a large Venn diagram that we try to create here. Yes, thank you. One set of key recommendations, and these are this is one summary that encapsulates many recommendations all at once. Seeks to fulfill this vision by establishing community gateways and activity centers as compact mixed-use centers, focused on frequent transit service, safe pedestrian movement, expanded housing and shopping choices, greater tree canopy and cool reflective surfaces, attractive community gathering spaces, and cultural and historic landmarks. Trying to bring everything together, capture everything all at once. Next slide, please. The plan's concept framework captures elements of the community's feedback that we received during those listening and visioning phases to identify where key recommendations are located within the plan area. A Main Street corridor shown in the thick purple line just above the blue east-west line, thick purple line there on Briggs Cheney Road, and a primary focus area, which it runs through the area shaded in dark red along Briggs Cheney Road, represent where critical transportation improvements and compact development is expected, envisioning this corridor as a renewed town center in East County. Lighter red secondary focus areas and other activity centers shown as blue asterisks on this framework plan identify where lower intensity mixed-use neighborhood centers are anticipated as well. Additionally, a pair of active transportation loops are shown in the framework plan in two shades of green dotted lines to represent the envisioned completion of an outer loop of recreation-focused park trails and neighborhood connectors, and an inner loop of on- and off-street pathways to facilitate movement between neighborhoods and activity centers without the need to use a car. Both loops represent a combination of existing trails and pathways and future connections needed to stitch them together. And one element of the plan is also trying to give attention to these common ownership areas, or HOAs, that was mentioned earlier in your meeting. seeking incentives, opportunities, aside from the typical ways that these connections are typically created in the right-of-way. This plan recognizes that there's a need to create more connections and easier, comfortable movement when there is not construction or when you're dealing with private entities. The draft plan zoning recommendations seek to implement the land use vision of the concept framework plan by establishing zoning districts that allow the property development and community amenities envisioned in the plan. Some zoning recommendations replace residential zones held over from before the county-wide zoning rewrite in 2014 with compatible new residential zones, such as from the RT, or that stands for residential townhouse zones, to low, medium, and high-density townhouse zones, or as they're currently acronymized, I think I just made a new word, TLD, TMD, and THD, so that's sort of a like-for-like zoning change. Another set of zoning recommendations better reflect existing land use character and density, such as recommending the townhouse high-density, or THD zone, for the portion of the Greencastle Lakes community that is today built as attached residential townhomes. That's in the northern part of the plan area here, in the dark yellow. Let me find my place again. Currently, that's zoned for single-unit detached residential development under the R90 zone. Still, other zoning recommendations are a change from current zoning districts to allow the kind of mixed-use compact development envisioned along the US 29 and Old Columbia Pike corridor, as well as Briggs Cheney Road, especially allowing future housing in areas where it's not currently a permitted use under existing zoning. Next slide. The next set of key recommendations seek to transition US 29 into a transit-first corridor that provides frequent and convenient regional connections for the plan area and beyond. This vision may be accomplished in a number of ways, as foreseen in the plan, with recommendations to build dedicated bus rapid transit lanes on US 29, expand the number of BRT stations in the corridor as future development occurs, enhance future station designs to provide greater access, comfort, and all-weather protection, and to establish mobility hubs at existing BRT stations and park and ride hubs that include commercial amenities, public art, electric vehicle charging stations, bicycle storage, and greater green space, trees, and shade. The plan also recommends supporting efforts to extend BRT service north along US 29 or possibly other roadways from Burtonsville, as is the current northern terminus of the Flash BRT line, into Howard County and beyond that. These transit-oriented recommendations seek to work in concert with other plan recommendations to establish safer crossings of US 29 for all travel modes, apply complete street design guidelines. Those are some of the town center, downtown, and other complete street types that we referred to earlier, that you were discussing earlier on your agenda, to make streets more amenable to all users as they're upgraded or rebuilt. Suggest ways to reconfigure or expand existing highway overpasses for greater bike and pedestrian safety and comfort, and to move away from building costly new freeway interchanges on US 29 to focus on public investments that are geared more towards transit and reconnecting communities. Next slide. A third set of key recommendations seek to complete a continuous network of trails and paths to better connect activity centers, neighborhoods, parks, and community facilities, both within and beyond the master plan area. The plan envisions that additional trail amenities in this network could include rest areas, community gathering and event spaces, linear parks, community gardens, historical and cultural wayfinding, and public art as well. See how we're trying to bring it all together and create more inclusive community facilities here. Several plan recommendations also focus on the adjoining Fairland Recreational Park in Montgomery County and the Fairland Regional Park, which is located in Prince George's County, suggesting a bi-county park study to enhance both parks by coordinating facility planning, operation, and maintenance, explore adding more activities and amenities for families and children, and establishing better access points into the parks on both sides from surrounding communities. The draft plan responds to the realities of climate change as it affects this community, in particular through the experience of urban heat islands in the summer and extreme rainfall events throughout the year, in addition to recommendations that seek to increase tree canopy, add cooler, more reflective surfaces on buildings and sidewalks and parking lots, and decrease impervious surfaces. The plan establishes the need for a resilience hub in East County as a center for daily community needs and a destination for reliable electricity, water, temporary shelter, food, indoor heating and cooling, social services, and fellowship during public emergencies. Due to its location in a cluster of equity focus areas in the county, a resilience hub would provide access to resources that help to transition community members out of a state of vulnerability and into a more resilient and adaptable existence. A fifth and final set of key recommendations seek to support a healthy food system by encouraging the establishment of healthy grocery stores and dining destinations, farmers markets, and additional community gardens. As you've seen, there is already one in the community, and more are envisioned as well. A food system study is recommended to explore how to establish and promote a more robust local food network that comprises the growing, processing, distribution, sales, consumption, and waste management of food, possibly in a centralized location located within the plan area, with demonstration gardens, educational programming, produce sharing, direct-to-consumer sales, and research and development of new trends in climate-resilient, sustainable systems. I like to put a lot of commas together, just kind of wrap it all in there. Next slide, please. A portion of the plan is dedicated to recommendations that pertain to districts of a shared character. These recommendations include more specific guidance in the event of individual property redevelopment, recommend new street and path connections, and establish future public improvements in the public realm and rights-of-way that will help to support private development and greater community health. Finally, the draft plan makes recommendations for how school capacity should be monitored as residential development occurs, to ensure that school investments anticipate the community needs, comma, I was going to continue there, but in addition, what priorities are placed on public benefits that are required as part of optional method development, what role a community advisory committee might play to help realize the plan's potential for greater community understanding and engagement in the planning process, recommendations for adopting a set of design guidelines for private development and public projects, and a list of prioritized capital improvements to guide future budgeting and agency work programs. In closing, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to provide this briefing to you on the Planning Board draft of the Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan, and we welcome any questions you have. We also look forward to the public hearing and future work session discussions.
Great. Is there anything else? Ms. Dunn, is that?
I don't have anything, and I'm looking forward to the public hearing and the work sessions as well. So.
Fantastic. During the presentation, it was noted the community building events and back in October of last year, and I went to the transformed parking lot to see the envisioning that you were undertaking, but more importantly to see the community engagement, and people were there and they were loving it. And so again, kudos to the planning department for continuing to go deep into the community to have these conversations. And as Vice President Friedson noted, we are continuing the important work of going into the community during these master plans and sector plans to hear from residents directly in the communities that they are affecting. I don't see any other comments. Just as I said that, Councilmember Jawando.
Just quickly want to thank the staff, and we all had, some of us are fortunate enough to be on PHP now. We get private. We got to go through this with you before, and we'll go through it in depth, but really appreciate the work and wish you all the best with the impending childbirth, and we will deliver this for you as well. So thank you very much.
There you go. Well played. And again, for people who want to follow the public conversation, we will be meeting in the East County Community Rec Center tomorrow at 7 p.m. So come to hear what the residents and neighbors think about this fantastic plan. So thank you, Planning Department, and appreciate your work. Thank you, Ms. Dunn and Mr. Harris. We are now moving to item C in the district council session, which is consideration of an annexation request from the city of Gaithersburg, and the request is ANX-9510-2023 at 8939 North Westland Drive and 8941 North Westland Drive. Ms. Madu is here to help us understand this annexation request.
Hello. So this annexation, the city of Gaithersburg is proposing to annex about 9 acres of land from Montgomery County into the city. And the mayor and city council of Gaithersburg held their public hearing on September 5th, and it was largely in support. I'll note this item did not go to committee first after discussions with the chair. In the past, when council has reviewed these, if it was not controversial, they went straight to council. But because of that, this is this council's first annexation. So briefing quickly what an annexation is, basically allows the legislative body of a municipality to enlarge its borders. In this case, it was initiated by petition and not by the city itself. So there's pretty limited actions the council can take here under state law. If the property is within the maximum expansion area for Gaithersburg and the zoning is the same, then the district council has no authority to prevent that annexation. If the proposed zoning is different, the district council can veto it. I will not bury the lead here. The proposed zoning is not different. So really, this is for you to just expressly approve to let them know that the council is on board with this. So there's actually 3 properties listed. It's on South Frederick, North Westland, and it's the Walnut Hill Shopping Center in Gaithersburg that's being redeveloped. I will say I listened to the public hearing and people seemed pretty excited about this project. And it is within those maximum expansion limits. So the developer is proposing a new retail pad, a convenience store with some fueling stations. I believe it's an Aldi's and a Sheetz, as well as some pedestrian connections, new landscaping, new lighting, new building improvements, just revitalizing this area and bringing it all into Gaithersburg zoning. The reason it's going all into Gaithersburg and not back to us is because the property is actually facing Gaithersburg, so that's why they're annexing in that direction. The current zoning is CRT, which is our commercial residential town zone. It's C2 and CD in Gaithersburg, and if you look at the list of uses, the uses are the same, the density is the same, the height's all the same. And both include a lot of retail with some residential. The developer says residential's not going to be something they do immediately, but there's potential for that in the next 15 to 20 years. Planning looked at this, found that there would be adequate public facilities, and then I did want to note, since I know you've done a lot of transportation stuff today, that there is a BRT station proposed near here, and if you look at this photo, the property owners have agreed to dedicate some of this land for that BRT station, which is this pink section on the bottom here. So planning board reviewed this and they recommended expressly supporting approval of this, and council staff has the same recommendation. So there's a resolution in your packet for you.
Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to the chair of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, and then the district council member.
Appreciate it, Mr. President. As noted, a number of the points that I would have made were expertly made by an actual expert, unlike how they would have been made by me. Yeah, I think this is one of the few land use issues that is essentially a no-brainer. Obviously, great to be able to work with our municipal partners in Gaithersburg. This is advancing a number of county and Gaithersburg municipal priorities, including bus rapid transit, not substantially different in terms of zoning, and given that it wasn't controversial, brought it to the full council, didn't go to the PHP committee. I will yield to my colleague at the president's discretion if he wants to motion, but I would be happy to move or second if he would prefer to move, since this did not go through the committee and requires a motion. So I'll yield back to you.
District Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much. I think with the exception of Councilmember Sales and anyone who's been involved in the city of Gaithersburg for many, many years, everyone always thought this was in the city of Gaithersburg to start with. You drive past it, it looks like it's in Gaithersburg. three sides, well, I guess the residential area behind it is aware that this wasn't in Gaithersburg. This should have been all along. There's a new partner with the ownership. They're certainly spending a lot of time and looks like a lot of money to bring this to the standard that it should be. My office has met with the people that live behind there as well, along with the city of Gaithersburg, along with the property owners, and they all are working together to get this to the spot where it should be. It's gotten fairly run down over the years, so I certainly am very, very supportive, and I will make the motion. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
If you're making the motion, it has been moved and seconded by Vice President Friedson. All those in favor of the annexation request, ANX 950-2023, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Great. Next time we go to New Fortune, it will be in the city of Gaithersburg. What?
It's a new owner.
New owner.
Yeah. But
There we go.
But you will be in the city of
It'll be new
Gaithersburg.
restaurant. Yes, new restaurant. Okay, so as noted earlier in the morning, we are going to return. We are going to return to Bill 1822. Our batteries are charged, and hey, there. We took up two amendments that were proposed in the packet. There are two more that are proposed, noting that there might be others made from the floor. Welcome, DEP. Hope you had a good lunch and you're ready for a conversation. Ms. Wellens, I'll turn it over to you, or we can just turn it over to the third amendment that's in the packet.
And we are on page number 4. Issue number 3 of the staff memorandum, the potential amendment by Councilmember Albornoz concerning the method of adopting regulations.
Councilmember Albornoz.
All right. Thank you all very much. Obviously, this has generated a great deal of conversation and discussion, which I really appreciate. This has been very thoughtful. I think everybody's trying to do the right thing here and balance what everyone has noted is a complex issue for a lot of different reasons. We have recently, on several occasions, moved to a Method 1 regulation, which I think is appropriate in this instance because clearly my colleagues and I have strong feelings and opinions on this particular piece of legislation, and that will give the council more flexibility to make adjustments as we see fit and discuss as a body. I have every degree of confidence in DEP's ability to make recommendations on those regulations, but as we know, the devil's always in the details, and so I'd like to move that we pursue a Method 1 regulation as opposed to a Method 2.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Albornoz. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Lutke. Okay, I will jump in. I appreciate the suggestion, Councilmember Albornoz. I will not be supporting it. The reason I won't be supporting it is because this conversation has taken far too long, in my opinion. Legislation that was introduced in 2022 did not have a committee work session until I became chair of that committee in 2023. We then had 2 subsequent full council sessions, and after it was tabled, we're now having essentially the third, and this might very well be the longest continuous work session on any item that this council has had, not only this year, but quite possibly during my time on the council, cumulatively. And my concern is that if we adopt a Method 1 regulation, nothing will be approved and debate will continue. And so I want to take action. I want to do this as quickly as possible, given all the thoughtful conversation we've had. But I think Method 2 is the best way to establish that and to approve something to then enact it. And so I will not be supporting this. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond. So there has been little to no engagement with the landscaping community on this issue. Little to none. That was acknowledged this morning. It was acknowledged in a conversation that I had yesterday. And it is okay for us to take our time and be thoughtful in enacting legislation. That is what we are supposed to do. That is what we are hired to do. And so I think it's more than appropriate for us to continue to take our time and be thoughtful in our approach, acknowledging this particular piece of legislation is going to have a dramatic effect on an entire sector of our business community. And so I think it is appropriate, and I take great issue with there being a concern in expediting the fashion and the manner in which we discuss legislation, which I think has been a general problem of this body for quite some time. So I strongly feel that method one is appropriate in this particular instance, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond to my colleagues' comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. So I think one of the reasons why this legislation has been taking so long is because it's so detailed. And when we talked at length this morning, there were many, many questions about how the rebate program's going to work, how the communication's going to work. Many people expressed concern about whether the communication outreach is going to reach the very people that we need to reach. And so I think that this is a situation where the devil is in the details, and we're passing legislation. We're making decisions without really understanding how the program's going to work. So I would support the amendment.
Councilmember Ludke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the time and attention we've all given to this issue, and certainly that you all have brought today to talk to us about the different things that you've already anticipated in rolling this out. But we're a very large county with very geographically diverse conditions, and there are a lot of people who are engaged in this issue who are deeply passionate about it, and thank you for their work. But they happen to be concentrated in certain areas within the county as opposed to the county as a whole. And so I do think it's appropriate to make sure that we're taking all of that into consideration when we're figuring out the regulatory framework that's going to encompass the entire county, where there are differing needs and different concerns, the least of which is the small business community, as Councilmember Albornoz noted in bringing this amendment forward. And I think we're all committed to making sure we get this done, and we're all committed to making sure we do it right. So I don't think we're going to unduly delay, and I know you're all committed to making sure those regulations are drafted promptly and that we've set a timeline and a barrier for that within the work we've already done today. But I think that we should have the opportunity to approve or disapprove and work on that via the method one format. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wellens, I have a question for you. It's being portrayed that method one is the only way to engage in discourse and to go through in a thoughtful, deliberative manner. Can you explain the difference between method one and method two?
Method two regulations would go into effect automatically 60 days after they've been submitted by the department to the council. Unless the council decides to extend that 60-day deadline, the council is free to do so if it feels that it needs additional time to deliberate.
Great. Thank you. Vice President Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz and colleagues. So a few things. Well, I did not vote to table this bill. So I was ready to vote for this the last time we took it up. I think most of the issues that we are going through, I felt like I was prepared to take those issues up. There have only been some modest changes to the issues that we took up, but there are some outstanding issues that need to be worked out that are part of the regulatory and regulation process. I will say that between the last meeting and today, I have not been particularly engaged, and there are questions about the level of engagement between the executive branch and the council. And so I am going to support this motion in hopes that it does not extend the time period that we had talked about. We have a date certain that we put forward. We have put the marker down of what we expect based on the prior conversation that we had. But my hope is that there is a much more proactive, much more intentional effort starting today to engage all 11 council members, all of whom are votes that are needed in order to pursue the program that the department wishes to move forward. And I hope as part of that, that there is engagement with the impacted individuals in the community, which I think has been underwhelming up to this point. So I support the policy here. I support the interest of the department moving forward, but it has to be much more of a partnership than it has been. There have been individual conversations happening with individual council members at ad hoc points in time in order to move forward, and it has not been a methodical, deliberative process of back and forth engagement that it needs to be. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt. There have been leadership changes in the department. We have a lot of faith in the new director that we all supported, which I look forward to, but I think now is the opportunity to do it, and I think moving forward with this as a Method 1 regulation really does set that expectation coming from the council that this is a partnership and we don't expect to get something that is essentially take it or leave it. And I just don't think that that's the way that we should be going about our business. So I'll support this. I'll yield back to you, Mr. President.
Councilmember Fani Gonzalez.
I would say that I do not support the amendment. I have proactively engaged with the county executives team and met with you because it's an issue that I truly care about. I was a speaker at the Minority Contractors Summit about, a month ago, and I brought it up with a whole bunch of Latino businesses, and when after I spoke, and I talked about this very issue after I spoke, people came to me saying, we'll adjust and we'll make sure that we comply with whatever requirements you have set forward. I think our duty, and I agree, as I said this morning, with a new schedule, just to give more time, and I am committed to work closely with you all to ensure my community is aware and notes that there is a rebate program that applies to this rebate program, but, delays after delays, excuse after excuse, I don't see that that's efficient and that's productive, so I'm just going to say no to the amendment and move forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, and I appreciate the comments of my colleagues and listening to the points that have been made and thinking back to the point I made earlier about having certainty for folks who are watching us and when things are going to move forward. At the end of the day, I think I'm going to vote against the amendment, but understand very much where my colleagues are coming from on this and want to continue engaging with them and the Department of Environmental Protection, but feel more comfortable doing the Method 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Turn your microphone on, sir. There you go.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will support the amendment. I think we need to make certain that what we're suggesting is going to be end up as the regulations themselves. I don't believe that it's necessary for us to hold this up forever. I think we can make our own timeline, and we could decide that amongst the council when this needs to come back and to keep it literally on the front burner. But I'm not someone that believes we're trying to hold something up. I think we're trying to show that we're doing it the right way and that we're not going to put people out of business for a reason that is a good reason, but we're not going to put people out of business, and we're going to work with them so that they can stay in business. Thank you.
Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Ms. Wallens, just you described, when the council president asked you to describe between different Method 1 and Method 2, you described Method 2, but I just want to get it on the record, the difference between. So let's just start with Method 2 since that's where you started. 6 months if there's no,
60 days.
60 days, excuse me. 60, I got the 6th part right. 60 days, it goes into effect unless the council acts. Is there any scope in which the council can or cannot act? As far as can we do whatever we want, or is it just an approval or disapproval? Could you just state the contours of the action that can happen from council under Method 2 regulations?
It's the council can approve or disapprove. If the council wants amendments, then we have to go back to the department, get the department to make amendments, and then approve the amended version.
Right.
But that's also the case with Method 1. We approve or disapprove, but the main difference is that without the council's approval, the regulation is never going into effect. It requires the council's approval to become effective.
Right. So thank you. You
I finally hit on
you answered my question. The second question, the only difference is the automatic nature of when it kicks in. We approve or disapprove in either case. Is that correct?
Yeah, unless
I
the
thought there
council
was a difference
decides not
there,
to act. If
actually.
the council doesn't act within 60 days of the receipt, then the regulation goes into
Under
effect
2. And the
automatically.
difference
Under
between
2.
Method 1 is what? On
And-
that point.
On that point, it never goes into effect until the council
Until we
approves it.
affirmatively approve
You
it.
have to affirmatively approve it,
In
exactly.
whole. So it's
Yes.
not like a line item, there's not like we have more, we can't just say we like this part or that part. I thought there was something different in the Method 1 in that regard.
You still need the department to make the adjustment. It needs to be in tandem.
Right, obviously, because they have to implement it. But,
Right.
But the incentive we have for them to play ball, so to speak, is that it doesn't go into effect until we approve it.
Correct.
Right, okay.
And I would note that given the council's earlier amendments to put the ban on sales effective July 1, 2024, obviously you want the rebate program up and running by then, which puts a lot of pressure to get the regulations approved in a pretty expedited timeline.
So, Mr. Monger, Director Monger, I will say I have had frustrations trying to work with the administration on not just this issue, other issues, and get a timely response. So I'm sensitive to that. You're not only you're a Catholic law alum, you're new. I know the administration is eager to move this forward in partnership. But I would just, I'm not sure what I'm going to do on this amendment, but I would ask, and no matter which way it goes, I think you're hearing from everybody the need for communication with us, the need for communication with the public and the stakeholders in an ongoing way. And I would just like you to reaffirm that commitment.
Absolutely, council member. We're committed to working with this body and the regulated community as this moves forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Mink.
Thank you for this conversation. I do think that having the date certain when this is gonna move forward is important, given the extent of the delays that we've seen so far. Not that it's not a complicated conversation. I think that you make very valid points, Councilmember Albernos. But I think our business community also benefits from having some certainty there. And I think that if we use the Method 2, it puts the pressure on us to ensure that we are heavily engaged in the conversation and that you all come to us with something that we are going to, that hopefully we're going to be able to pass as quickly as possible, which is what we want to do, and that, we're going to be able to put the pressure on us to come to consensus before then as well about what that is going to be, but it makes sure that it moves forward. So I think that part is important. And I also feel comfortable, you all are the ones who are going to be doing the implementing. We have given you a lot of instruction about what we want to see in the regs, and I'm sure that there will be more to come. Given that you are the ones doing the implementing, I do think that it makes sense for you to have a heavy hand into putting together realistically what could that look like with the type of timeline and rollout that we have talked about. And I wanted to also check and see if there's anything that you wanted to add, Director Monger, to this conversation.
Thank you, Councilmember. I would just echo what you said about the regulated community appreciating certainty. We spent a lot of time today talking about how we're going to be dealing with small businesses, a lot of non-native English speakers, and this is a program that we are absolutely committed to making sure we educate all regulated individuals and entities fully on. Part of doing that is being able to be really clear about what's going to happen when. So I'm concerned that switching methods of regulations might send a signal, unintended or otherwise, that there's lack of clarity around this, and I worry about what that might mean for those who are trying to learn the program and how they can comply with it.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm still listening to colleagues. If you have more comments, please do. I'm still, my ears are open on this one. It's an important question, and I agree that this has taken a long time because it's a complex situation, and we want to make sure that we get it right. So thank you for that input.
Thank you. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. So much of what we talked about in terms of the rebate program and communications is not in the legislation. And it's at this point, it's just our expressed desire for what we think should be in the regulation. And we haven't taken any votes on that. We haven't talked about what the rebate should be. We haven't talked about, right now, there's a generalized proposal that there's a 3-tiered system, that we have $100 for residential, $500 for commercial, $750. So that is just a recommendation kind of floating in the air right now. And so I think I agree with the proposal that was presented today of how the rebate program could and should happen. I completely agree with your ideas on how we're going to communicate to a vulnerable population, to make sure from day one, my primary concern is who is going to get this money, right? And so we've expressed that interest without having the second feedback loop on the regulation. All we've done is passed a law that then we don't have any control over it. And I understand that that regardless of method 1 or method 2, we're going to see the regulation. But I just go back to reiterating, we've spent a lot of time talking about the details of the rebate program and the importance of communication, and I feel like we should see it through as a body. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll add to this conversation. I appreciate the perspectives and the open-ended conclusions that some colleagues have at this point. It's important to note that we unanimously approved a timeline change. We slid the timeline to accommodate more conversation and more engagement. And what a method 1 would do is basically leave the whole thing open-ended. There is no conclusion. And what method 2 does is it creates a shot clock. It's a 60-day shot clock where if the county executive and DEP want this to be successful, they will engage every single one of us. And if a majority of us, speaking of control, if a majority of the council members, just 6 council members, do not support the regulation, it's not going to be approved. We have the power. And it's incumbent upon the executive branch to do that engagement with us. And if any one of us feels that they have not done the engagement with the community, do not support the regulation. But to unanimously support a sliding of a timeline and then adopting this amendment, leaving the whole thing open-ended, my concern is this never gets adopted and it never happens. And if that's the goal of some people, so be it. I'm not going to question. But I want this to happen. And the only way that we make it happen is by setting timelines and forcing engagement. That's what Regulation 2 does. That's why I'm not going to support this amendment. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I understand what you're saying. I disagree with part of what you're saying, however. This is saying that if 6 people did not agree with this, then we wouldn't approve the regulation, and it would go into, if it's method 2, it goes into effect without approval 60 days later. Yes, it does. That's what's in our packet. It says if the council takes no action within 60 days of receiving the regulations, the regulation will be effective the day after the deadline. The council can adopt a resolution to extend the 60-day deadline. This actually keeps method 1, and perhaps we should say that we want this to come back within, whatever fast time frame that the department can bring it back. But to me, what we're doing is putting ourselves in a box by saying that if we can't agree on the regulations, then 60 days later this comes into effect without our agreement. And that to me is a concern. Thank you.
I disagree with that interpretation. If a majority disagrees with it, they will extend the deadline to continue the conversations and negotiation. That's method 2. Councilmember Stewart.
Sorry, that was the clarification I wanted, because let me make sure I understand method 2. If the council under method 2, a majority can disapprove the regulation, and that would be an action. And so under this, we took an action, so therefore it can't go into place. So I think.
Right.
So
there would have to be a vote to disapprove.
Right, but right. So, but going on what Council President Glass said, if a majority of the body disapproved, then that is an action, and then the regulations could not go into place. Is that correct?
Correct. If that was the vote.
And this is a majority rules body, and if 6 people send a letter to the president of the council, whomever that president is, they can get something on the agenda. That's in our rules. Councilmember Katz.
So we can be clear, it's not clear, but this says in our packet, if the council takes no action within 60 days, if we disapprove it within 60 days, if we say we don't agree with the regulations that are sent over, then what happens at that point?
Then the department can go back to the drawing board and re-promulgate, restart the process and go.
And it doesn't say that they restart. It says that it has to be, if it takes no action within 60 days. To me, if we don't approve it, that's taking no action.
If you don't, so there are a couple options. You can have a vote to disapprove the regulation, in which case the regulation is dead. The department can start over with the new regulation.
And you're saying that the time frame starts over.
Right. If the council affirmatively disapproves it. If you take no action, then yes, the regulation goes into effect on the 61st day after you've received it.
So you're saying that if the council voted it down, then that's when it starts over.
Yeah. Correct.
But if we can't agree to take an action, if there's not 6 votes, if there's not 6 votes, then it goes into effect 60 days later. If there's
Correct.
no vote,
unless you pass a resolution to extend the deadline.
and you'd have to. I still feel much more comfortable with method 1. Thank you.
Councilmember Balcom.
Sorry. I think it's probably better without the mic. So the issue is, the point about delay is a moot point, because if both methods suggest that a majority can delay the process by disapproving the regulations, they're both doing the same thing. They're both delaying it. To me, method 1 is cleaner. We know we're going to look at these regulations. If, for instance, there are regulations that come through that we're not going to look at, so if we don't take an action, they go into effect. I know that I want to look at these regulations in detail. I just think that method 1 is cleaner because they're both will delay the process if a majority disapproves them.
Councilmember Lutke.
Sorry, I almost pushed the wrong button. It's that late in the day. Yeah, no, I just, there is this sort of logical hiccup happening here procedurally about this. And for me, the reason why Method 1 regulations are important, given the discourse that we're having, and frankly, again, noting the commitment that the department has, I believe that you are going to hustle to get this done. I also believe that there is substantial interest up here in making sure we review them and make sure we give feedback and do this effectively and efficiently. It's just that the only one of these two options that guarantees us that opportunity is Method 1 regulations. Method 2 does not guarantee us that it will get on the agenda for us to have that discourse and discussion in the future unless 6 of us each write to the council president to ask so. And I think it's that procedural piece where we want to affirmatively say, at least those of us who are supporting this amendment, we definitely want to review, we definitely want to have discourse, we definitely want to vote on this. And the delay issue of which would or would not delay is irrelevant, because in either case there could be delay. But I'm firmly committed to making sure we keep the train on the tracks. Thank you.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you. I think there was an implication made that some of us, I think that was directed at me, want to delay this, which is not correct. I have very serious concerns with this bill, which I have enumerated, but I also think that we would all benefit from at least one more robust conversation after you have engaged, which I think should have been done before in the development of the bill to begin with. But the last recommendation you make in your PowerPoint presentation is that you are going to engage with stakeholders. So you will have a lot of valuable information that you will be in a unique position to be able to share with the body. And rather than have that be one-off conversations, which I acknowledge is not the optimal way of doing that, this guarantees that you will present that information to us as a collective body, which will put us in a better position to make an informed decision on whether or not we accept the regulations as you provide them. That's all this does. It doesn't mean it's going to be delayed any further. It just means that we are thoughtful in our deliberation on an issue that we've all acknowledged is complex and impacts a lot of people. So I continue to feel strongly that the Method 1 regulation is the best approach here, and I look forward to that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Joando.
Really appreciate my colleagues in the conversation, and collectively it's helped me make up my mind, and I'll support the amendment. I do think that just this process of tabling it and bringing it back up proves that there was an interest in passing this. We all wanted to get done. I was in the group that tabled. I was also in the group that wanted to bring it up. I voted to table so I could bring it up, so I could reserve the right. And and so I'm glad we did. And we want to get it done appropriately. But I do, just from experience, you're seeing this robust nature of this conversation. We want to be engaged, make sure it's right. It does guarantee that we will have a point in time to check in on it. Whereas the other, it's a little looser. And so, because there's so much engagement, I don't think the certainty point, which I was very persuaded by, I don't think it's in play in this instance, because we are going to engage on this. And so I think, and I will just commit as one council member, I don't think there's any sense here of delaying this. We're going to take it up in earnest and get it passed, hopefully under the same timeline, and deliver the same, certainty to the business community. But I do think setting up a formal point in time is a good thing. So I'll support the amendment. Thank you.
Vice President Friesen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Councilmember Joando and colleagues. First of all, I think everybody is at this conversation for the right reasons. I just want to note that. I think it's important for us all to acknowledge there might be some disagreements on this or disagreements on a lot of issues, but I don't think that there are ulterior motives. I think everybody's putting forward good faith efforts to try to address issues that they think are important, and I think this has been a really important and positive conversation and discussion. The one thing that will delay this is the executive branch not engaging with the council and the stakeholders. So I just want to make that very clear. Regardless of what we decide to do here, the only real question is whether something goes into an effect automatically within 60 days. If there is any change that a majority of council members wishes to see, or that stakeholders raise that convince a majority of council members, then we have to go back to the drawing board, which is going to delay the process. So I'll just reiterate the point that I made originally, whether it's Method 1 or Method 2 regulations, the only thing that is going to determine whether or not this gets implemented in a timely manner or not is the level of proactive engagement that the department and the executive branch more broadly engages with the public, with the stakeholders, and with the council. So we're hearing a commitment on that here that has been talked about more than any other topic at this dais. So, I am going to support the amendment, but regardless of what method of regulation moves forward, that is going to be the determinant. I don't want to, us to get caught up in which type of regulation is for delay and which type of regulation is for moving forward, because I don't think either will have that impact. It will be up to the department and your diligence in moving forward with your commitments here, which I take at face value as well, because I think, just like colleagues, the department has been moving forward with your best efforts to get this done, because I believe you do want to move forward with this policy and are attempting to do that. So I appreciate that. I'll support the amendment. I'll yield back to you, Mr. President.
Okay, we have an amendment before us moved by Councilmember Albornoz to change the method of regulation from Method 2 to Method 1. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? And the amendment passes 8-3. And the fourth amendment in the packet by Councilmember Albornoz, I'll turn to him.
All right, I'm reading the room here. I know we're all really tired of this topic. I get it, but this is the last amendment before us. It's an amendment that I brought up in advance, and what it would do is exempt properties exceeding 50 acres for 5 years, again, in the interest of trying to provide a longer runway, acknowledging that larger properties are more challenging to be able to use equipment on. And among the bigger issues here is the time that this is going to take away from the landscaping community, because it does take longer to utilize the electric leaf blowers on properties. And so the intent here is for this to minimize the impact and create a longer runway. So with that, Ms. Wellens, I think I described it, but just wanted to make sure I got that right.
I'm so sorry. I was talking with the director about an issue of interpreting language, and
no worries. I just went
apologize.
forward with discussing the exemption of properties exceeding 50 acres for 5
Yes.
years. I basically gave the context, but that's the final amendment that I'm putting forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Albornoz moves his amendment for exempting properties of 50 acres or for 5 years. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Balcom. Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Councilmember Albornoz, for your thoughtful amendments. I do have a question about capacity and how this would affect the businesses that you are trying to cover with this amendment. Do we know what the current inventory is? Do we know where the current county is with transitioning our equipment to electric-powered equipment?
I don't have that answer. I'm going to yield to DEP, but I did mean to bring this up. It was alluded to. Our colleagues in MCPS and Park and Planning and our sister county agencies will obviously have to abide by this law as well, which will have a fiscal impact. There is a fiscal note in the document, but it might be worth bringing back up again how much that would cost county taxpayers.
So I will speak to schools and parks as state agencies. Technically, this law would not apply to their properties. We do have in the fiscal impact statement the costs that were estimated in discussions with them with I believe the original fiscal impact statement was the intention to try to find funding to support those agencies in making the transition.
Do you have the dollar amount that was proposed in the packet?
I do not have the fiscal impact statement in front of me, but it appears some others do.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the fiscal impact statement appears at Circle 10. It starts at Circle 10 of the packet.
I yield. Thank
Thank you. Councilmember Lutke.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I just want to make sure I understand the language here, because what we have in our packet in light of what we did this morning on our other, so above the language it says temporary exemption from the bill's ban on use, which we have now included as a date certain based on our efforts this morning. And then the proposed language below, it says for a period of 5 years after the effective date of this act. That effective date of the act is not actually the same as the effective date of the ban. So I think I wanted to ask if it would be okay as a friendly amendment to say that it would be for a period of 5 years after the effective ban on use, or after the ban on use date that we decided this morning.
I would accept that friendly amendment.
Okay, thank you. And I will support this amendment, not just because I tweaked it, but because you know, again, as I said previously, the parcels of land and the scope of land at issue in the county and the diversity of it in this county, that's a blessing, but it also presents some unique situations. And you know, I know that technology improves greatly over time, and certainly in the electric use of different appliances, more energy efficient, etc. We're making leaps and bounds and strides, but we're not there yet when it comes to tackling large scale properties like this. So I think that by allowing that delayed effective date for properties of that size would help accommodate individuals to get up to speed and find devices that will be better, more suitable for those types of properties. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. We have too many buttons. It's too late in the day. So I just wanted to say that this really does echo the conversation that we had months and months ago with in the ag reserve. Large properties, part of the issue is the transportation of the equipment, the battery usage, but to go back to something that was mentioned very earlier this morning, is that this is a noise control bill, and it doesn't have the same impact on these very large properties, and so I will support the amendment.
Thank you. I have a question. I know that we already, I think, through one of the council previous work sessions, adopted an exemption for producers in the ag reserve. Ms. Wellens, can you explain the exemption that we've already provided, given what Councilmember Balcom just alluded to, which I understand?
Yes. Okay. The exemption that the council previously adopted appears at Circle 3, and this is lines 36 to 41 of the amended bill. So this is an exemption for agricultural producers located on agriculturally assessed properties where farming or agricultural use and activities are permitted, under the zoning code.
So, in lay terms, is this any properties within the agricultural reserve?
Well, you specifically took out the exemption originally did specify that it would have to be an agricultural reserve, but that was amended out.
Okay, so any properties that are engaged in agriculture, farms essentially, right? Breweries, wineries, those sorts of things. Just trying to bring this down to a basic level of understanding, right?
Right.
Because the concern I have is that this amendment would then allow the largest properties in Montgomery County an exemption. And if we are passing a piece of legislation that captures all property, those on a quarter of an acre, half an acre, but we're exempting properties with 50 acres or more that are not already covered, I'm not sure what those would be. And I have concerns about that. I explicitly supported the amendment last time about agricultural producers. I understand those are very different, but if we're talking about other types of property, I'm not sure what they are, and it gives me concern, so I will not be supporting this. Vice President Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was originally got in the queue. I wanted to clarify the MCPS parks issue. It's a noise ordinance. We don't have control over state property, so glad that got clarified. On this, I'll just note, if I recall correctly, Councilmember Albernez's original proposal was a 5-acre lot. I thought that was too small because of the issue that Council President Glass had raised, that we do have very large houses on 5-acre properties, and made me a little bit uncomfortable that we're picking and choosing. A 50-acre property is a different type of property, and so I think that was a reasonable compromise to address the same goal. I think it casts a much different net here, and so I will support it. I do appreciate the expansion from 5 to the much larger number, because I do think it changes the dynamics of what this is capturing. And I'll also note, as was mentioned earlier, I do have some concerns about the transition based on battery storage and what we're capable of doing today, and conversations that we've heard about generators and other kind of end runs around these. And on huge properties, we could be eliciting behaviors that are actually worse than this, what this would do. So I appreciate the compromise that was put forward, and because it was changed in an effort of compromise, I will support it. Back to you, Mr. President.
Just to better understand this, I was asking questions, Ms. Wellens, or maybe to the sponsor of the amendment. What properties are we talking about? If we're not talking about agricultural producers, what are we referring to?
The amendment speaks to any residential or commercial property that contains at least 50 acres of land. I can't provide you with an example. I'm sorry.
White Flint. There are also our biomedical science campuses have significantly large acreages as well. And so some of our larger commercial property owners who, obviously it takes a lot longer to address the needs within those properties, is what we had in mind.
If I can speak to this, council, to the question about large landscapes. So some examples include, this would exempt all of our golf courses. This would exempt many of our HOAs that own over 50 acres that surround homes where a noise issue could be an issue. It might exempt some of our private schools, and it also can benefit our larger landscapers who service those properties that would not have to make the transition.
That was the response I was looking for. Thank you.
And it's 5 years.
Councilmember Fani Gonzalez.
I will say thank you for pointing out the section 31B9 that talks about the agricultural zones. I will not be supporting the amendment. This is not just about noise. This is about health. This is about the workers who are breathing this. That's what this is about. It's not, it's the whole thing about, 50 acres, nobody's going to listen to it. There's no point there. This is about the health of low-income workers that we're trying to protect. The irony is that you're going to have people working at NIH, moving the leaves, smoking all these things because they have over 50 acres. I cannot allow that. There's no way, personally. Thank you.
There's amendment that is before us that has been amended by Councilmember Lutke. So all those in favor of...
I amended your amendment.
You amended, yeah, you amended the amendment regarding the date. All those in favor of this amendment excluding properties of 50 acres or more? All those opposed? And the amendment fails 6-5. So those are all the amendments that are in the packet. Councilmember Joando.
I'm going to be quick. We talked about this earlier. I would like to Councilmember Friedson, I know will come after me here, but I think we can either do this together or separately, but I do think, given the discussion today and the moving of the timeline, and also understanding the imperative to do this and to do it well, but also the financial burden in the transition, I would like to move that we remove the requirement that you have to trade in a gassed leaf blower in order to get a rebate. Also open to the concept of the tiered system that was discussed, but I don't think that I think you should still be able to get the full rebate if you don't turn it in. I'd be open to a tiered system if it's above, if you get an extra $100, $200, whatever it would be, if you turned in the old one. So the motion, just to keep it clean and not take, unless we want to put it together, but I'll just make my simple motion for now, that we remove the requirement to have to receive a rebate, to have it to trade in an older leaf blower.
Okay, motion made by Councilmember Jawando to strike. I'll turn to Ms. Wellens. Line 16, 17, yeah.
So it would be looking at Circle 2 of your packet. So lines 14 and 15, you would strike to replace combustion. I don't know why I can't pronounce that. Excuse me. Engine-powered leaf blowers or leaf vacuums, and then on lines 19 through 20, it would end after, it would say, there would be a period after director, and then you would strike and deliver the combustion engine-powered leaf blower or leaf vacuum to the county.
Okay, so that's been moved by Councilmember Jawando, seconded by Councilmember Sales. Vice President Friedson.
Yeah, so I think we can solve this by deleting that and then taking it up in regulation by deleting those items, and I would just suggest that that be the motion. We can work out the rest, and you and I and DEP and the rest of colleagues can work together to come up with a solution. If we don't amend that out, we wouldn't have the opportunity to do it because we would have put into law the requirement that in order to receive a rebate, you must supply a combustion device. So I would just suggest that. My suggestion is going to be, just since we're talking about it and you're going to prepare regulations to us, that we keep the baseline of what it is currently at the 500, 750, 100 based on the different categories, but that there be an additional amount if you return an item as part of that. So I'll leave to you what is an appropriate amount. If you're also returning your combustion engine, the idea being we want to incentivize that behavior, but we don't want to prohibit somebody from getting an electric unit because it may not be perfect for them to give up their other unit entirely as well. They might have multiple, whatever the case may be. As Councilmember Jawando said this eloquently earlier, but I don't want to lose, from what the department was saying, I don't want to lose the incentive that we want to take these out of service over time. Our goal is to incentivize a behavior that is healthier and better for everybody. So I don't think we have to adjudicate that now. I think that's a longer discussion. I think this is one of the areas where you're really going to have to engage stakeholders and engage us, demonstrate that we're getting to a point that will actually move the needle as we'd want it, and that we have the funding that is going to be required to do this. But I think if the motion is just to delete those items that require the turning it in, we can figure that out through regulation. With that, I'll yield back to you, Mr. President.
Are you motioning?
I'm requesting a friendly amendment to make the motion to strike the language as...
I think that was the motion.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
then if that's the motion, then we're good.
Okay. Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I think I agree with Councilmember Friedson, but just Council Vice President Friedson, but just want to be on the record that I do want to come back to this issue and the implications for whether or not we have people trade in or not trade in, and what are the options when you come back to us on regulations. So I'm not 100% convinced yet that we shouldn't have it, but I think we should have the flexibility to have you do the research, do the study, and come back with a recommendation. Thank you.
Councilmember Balcom.
Thank you. So I'm not convinced either, but we don't have to be convinced right now because it'll come back to us and we'll be able to look at it. So one thing that I would suggest, though, is I understand it from a commercial perspective, because the commercial owner may be using the equipment outside of Montgomery County. I don't think it makes sense for the residential owner. If they're getting a rebate from us, albeit a small rebate, we should be taking that leaf blower out of the system and getting it to scrap metal. So I would suggest that. I'll be looking to that in the regulation, that maybe that from a residential perspective, they need to be turned in.
I'll jump in real quick. I appreciate particularly Councilmember Stewart and Balcom, the open-endedness of this, right? Knowing that we have to come back to it. And I think this clearly will be a conversation. And now that we've switched to method one, we have to have that conversation. From my perspective, we are here because we want to encourage more environmentally friendly practices throughout the county. We've been talking about that for months. And in order to help change people and encourage them, there needs to be some trade-off. And if we ban the sale of gas-powered leaf blowers, which this legislation will do, but then don't require them, allow them to continue to be on the street, yet handing out rebates so that people get more equipment, I think that complicates things, and by chance, perhaps even sets us back in our goal. And so while we have to have a conversation about it, I will not support this amendment, because if people are going to ask for a rebate from the taxpayers, they need to trade in their gas-powered leaf blower. And if they do operate in other jurisdictions, then they can use those leaf blowers in other jurisdictions. If they only operate here, they can sell it on Facebook Marketplace or sell it on their neighborhood listserv, like the couch that I just bought from one Facebook Marketplace. They're common things that people engage in. But if we're going to provide subsidies and rebates, there needs to be the trade-off. So I will not support this amendment. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Just want to restate the amendment that we are removing the prohibition, or the requirement rather, and striking that language that requires a trade-in for a rebate, correct?
Correct. Although unfortunately a clarification occurred to me, which relates to the timeline. You'll recall earlier you chose a date certain of December 31st, 2026 for when purchases could last be made of the gas-powered leaf blowers that can be turned in.
The ban on sale.
So I'm wondering, so no, not the ban on sale. The ban on, it's the very last sentence of the uncodified section 2 of the staggered implementation. So it says that for the rebate program, that only leaf blowers, only gas-powered leaf blowers that were purchased before December 31st, 2026 would qualify for this trade-in program.
Right.
So I'm wondering if since we're taking out
to remove that
the trade-in program, if that could be a separate amendment for your consideration, but I think it would be cleanest to take that out as well, because you don't know if this is even going to be an issue.
Yeah, I would agree. I think to be consistent, but I don't think it, to the points that were made from colleagues who aren't sure, it doesn't remove this issue can still be dealt with in regulation. That same line that you just read could come back to us in regulation for the rebate program in general.
Yes.
Right. So I would say for now we should remove both. So I would amend my motion to strike that the requirement, but also strike the relationship to the timeline of when the gas-powered leaf blower was purchased. Councilmember Sales, you okay with that?
Fine with that. Thank you.
And then I'll make just a point. I think Councilmember Balcom brought up a really good point that we need to take up. I agree that it's not the same for residential, and that could be reflected in the regulation. I was thinking primarily in the commercial setting, because we made that year period where you can still use between the ban on sale and the ban on use. There's a year in there. There's also the issue of when the rebate, has to, when you apply for the rebate, and figuring out the real financial decisions that are embedded in these transitions that we have to make. And I will also say that to get the rebate, and I'm assuming this will be in the regulation too, you're going to have to purchase a cleaner leaf blower, right? To get the rebate, right? Isn't that what you're intending? Right? You'd have to buy a new one. You'd have to present that. I know the regulation isn't before us, but I'm assuming that's what you would require as proof. Is that correct? Put your mic on. Put your mic on, please.
The requirement for the trade-in would be most likely at the time of purchase or prior to purchase
Right.
in order to have the application approved.
Perfect. Right. So you'll have to verify that. So that is a good in and of itself. They're purchasing and getting money for something that is actually benefiting the environment. Obviously, you still, to Councilman Friedson's point, we also, I think you've heard interest from him and from me and from others, that an incentive to turn in a dirtier device could get you some X amount more. I think that's a good way to balance it too. But again, we're trying to balance the equities of these transitions are hard. The communication will be challenging, but very important. And so I think this will give us the option to balance those equities. So thank you and appreciate the opportunity to speak on the motion.
So can we just clarify, because Ms. Welland helped amend? Yeah, so.
What we're striking.
So we're striking the following language from lines 14 to 15. To replace combustion engine-powered leaf blowers or leaf vacuums. And then on lines 19 through 20, you would be striking the language and deliver the combustion engine-powered leaf blower or leaf vacuum to the county. And then in the uncodified section, which starts at line 53, which you amended this language earlier to, you would just delete in its entirety the language that starts on 57, goes through line 59, that says subsection G of section 31B9 under section 1 of this act must apply to reimbursement only for purchases of combustion engine, etc. To the end of that line 59, you would just strike that language in its entirety.
Thank you. Vice President Friedson.
Thank you for that. Appreciate Councilmember Balcom's suggestion. For the record, I agree with that. I think business is different from resident here. Most residents only need one a leaf blower. Businesses need more than that to service most properties. Also, just wanted to clarify, because there have been a number of comments that have been made that I think there's some misunderstanding about what this impacts and what it doesn't. So I just want to clarify once and for all. This is a noise ordinance for federal property. Does this include a restriction on federal property?
It would not. We have no control over federal
NIH property, this would not include. I just want to make sure everybody understands, because comments were made. I think it's important. You noted earlier, MCPS, park and planning by county commissions, those properties are not included as part of this.
That's correct.
Okay, I just think it's important for everyone to know what we're talking about, what we're not talking about. And then there was a comment about the sale. We're prohibiting the sale, so you couldn't sell after the point at which we're prohibiting sales. Would that include Facebook Marketplace? We have trouble regulating internet, so this is kind of a gray area. So I would assume that our intention is to prohibit the sale, which would include Facebook Marketplace, but obviously the internet is something that is beyond the scope of our authority, so I just wanted to check with that. An open legal question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how, I think that would be very tough to enforce. I mean, and then you have to ask, is the sale occurring at the point of origin? Is it occurring where the person places the online order? I think we have to assume that it's not affecting those sales, because I don't see how DEP, it's not explicitly stated in the bill, but I think that would be open for interpretation, and I'm not sure that DEP could enforce that as a practical matter.
Okay, so we talked about that specifically, if you could just sell it on Facebook Marketplace. The goal here is to prohibit the sale. I think that should be in general, but if we can't enforce certain things, then, you know, we are limited by the reality in which our authority resides. But I think, you know, I just thought that those points were important because those watching probably would be a little bit confused.
I mean, if you're a resident selling it, then you're selling it from here. I think that's going to fall under the prohibition on sales.
Well, I would encourage you in the regulation to consider this and think about whether or not you want to bring something back. I don't know that we're going to adjudicate it here, but you know, these are issues that were raised I thought should be clarified. I'll yield back to you, Mr. President.
Councilmember Lutke.
What if it's on free cycle? I mean, there's no charge. Is it really a sale? No, I got back in the queue because a couple times in the earlier discussion, there was a mention of you can't get a rebate for something when it's sold, if it'll be sold after December 31st, 2026. That's actually the end of the rebate period, but the ban on sale is July 2024. So I just wanted to make that clear. The ban on the sale is way ahead of time for the rebate. So if somebody's buying, I mean, I don't know, and maybe this is something you want to, if somebody buys a gas leaf blower somewhere, might not be here, you know, they've been across the river or what have you, can they still get a rebate? Would you need to take that into consideration in the regs? So the ban on the sale went into effect here, but we don't have laws up around the county. We buy stuff in other places. And they bought it somewhere else. What do you do with that consumer who's now stuck because they've purchased a gas leaf blower after the ban on sale here in Montgomery County, but they have it and now they become subsequently aware, if they did not know before, and now they want to trade it in? What do you do with that?
So, Councilmember, I think your question is a good one, and it goes back to the timeline we discussed this morning. There's deliberate amount of time between each segment of the timeline to allow for education and awareness so that all affected entities, be they commercial or residential, are aware of what's going to be happening on which specific date, and that applies both to the ban of sale, so that of course that would be businesses here in county, but it also applies to the ban on use. So I think, you know, without speaking for anybody else here, I think that the reason this schedule was laid out was so that there'd be plenty of time to educate people so that they're aware of the timeline well in advance of it happening, to avoid circumstances like the one you described.
Right, but I just want to make sure, since earlier there was reference from this side of the room that you would be able to get a rebate even if you bought the device, the gas-powered device, on December 31st, 2026. Is that accurate or inaccurate? Because if they've purchased it on the date of the deadline of the rebate program, are you not trying to say you can't buy them after the ban on sale goes into effect, which is July 2024?
If I can just speak, I'm not sure if I'm understanding you correctly in the question, council member, but if somebody purchases a gas-powered leaf blower between now and the ban on sale, let's just pick Amazon, right? They purchase it on Amazon, or they purchase it after that date, or they purchase it after the ban on use is in effect. They still can't use it in the county. And if the rebate program is over, they would not be able to exchange that for a rebate if there's a trade-in requirement for that piece of equipment. So I'm not sure if I fully understand your question, but if it's related to the purchase of gas-powered leaf blowers and the rebate program has ended and they intended to turn it in and they also bought an electric leaf blower, they would not be able to make that exchange.
Okay. I think it clarifies it. I wasn't clear in when you were saying the dates earlier, if that was a mistake in phrasing it that way or if that was intentional, and that's why I raised that, because there is a deliberate distance between the end of the rebate period and the end of the ban on sale, right? So that we can accommodate that. But there should also, I mean, at some point within that 2.5-year span, you say there's a cutoff if you've purchased one after the ban went into effect. Where do you go, right?
Right, so we have it right now that the ban on sale precedes the ban on use.
Right.
And then after the ban on use, the rebate program is proposed under the timeline to continue for 18 months.
Right, but what I'm saying is you would still give Are you intending to still give the rebate benefit to those who purchase gas-powered leaf blowers after the ban on sale goes into effect?
I understand your question. Yes, we don't have a way of tracking when they purchased it or where they purchased it
Gotcha.
from. There's no date stamp. We're not
Right.
going to be checking serial numbers of when it was sold at market.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you. I just want to note that unfortunately I changed my mind. I'm not going to vote for the amendment just because we spent so much time going over this in the T&E committee, and I feel like each piece of a change is linked to another piece here, and given the hour and the implications of what taking out both of these pieces may mean, I would prefer leaving it as is, but in the regulations, looking at what Councilmember Friedson talked about maybe a graded approach in terms of what gets turned in or something. But I'm concerned if we don't have people turn anything in and then we're taking out the time, as was noted. I think at this point in our conversation, I'm not able to think through all the ripple effects here. And the point is that we want to stop the usage of gas-powered leaf blowers. So I'm going to keep with that intent and vote against this amendment. But thank you for raising the issue.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
Clarifying, is the graded approach that was just mentioned possible if we leave that language in? My understanding was that we're removing a language in order to be able to consider the graded approach, which I think
I misspoke. It's very late. We've been through this so much in committee as well, and I'm just really worried about having last-minute amendments at this point, that we're taking out pieces of this bill that were carefully thought through, and I just don't have the opportunity to think through all the repercussions of that. So I kind of changed my mind, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I also have concerns about not wanting to rush things through, and I know that a lot of time and energy has been put into this. My feeling is that, or my understanding is that by removing the language, we allow ourselves more of that flexibility to decide to, we could stick with how it is now, but it allows us the flexibility to pursue that graded approach potentially. And so I would be more comfortable with that flexibility, and so I'll support the amendment.
Councilmember Jondo.
No longer need to speak.
So I'll just say, I appreciate Councilmember Mink using the word flexibility. I am inflexible in having gas-powered leaf blowers in use in perpetuity, or at some later date, or at some later time, after some later regulation that is approved. I will not support the amendment because I am inflexible in my goal. Councilmember Joando.
I'll say something now. I just want to be clear. We did this whole thing is set up flexibility. We've set up these timelines. It will be able to be used for a year. I think Council President voted for that, for extending that time for how long they can be used. So we all want the same thing here. We want to transition. The question is, how do we do it in an equitable way that is going to actually get to the goal where we want to get? So I think this allows us the opportunity to consider this more carefully in a tiered approach in light of the changes we made earlier. I think the fact that we extended the time of use changes the business decision of when you make the transition and when you get the rebate. Also, it matters how much money the county executive sends over in the budget, and how, there's a lot of things that impact all of this. And I think what we've demonstrated today is that we take it seriously. We want to ban the usage of these and the sale, and we want to do it in a way that protects the transition as much as possible. And so anyone that goes and gets a rebate and purchases a new efficient and less noisy leaf blower, that's a positive thing. It's also positive if they turn in the other leaf blower, but when they do it and how they do it is something that I think could impact the commercial side, more than the individual resident. So thank you, and I appreciate the consideration.
We have an amendment before us. All those in favor of the amendment regarding the transaction of gas-powered leaf blowers and transitioning to new other leaf blowers, raise your hand. All those against? And that amendment passes 8-3. Any additional amendments from the floor, colleagues? Okay, is there a motion to move this legislation to ban
Second.
gas-powered leaf blowers and encourage Montgomery County residents to transition to electric leaf blowers?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed. Is there?
And I seconded it.
Councilmember Sales moves. Councilmember Lutke seconds. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Lukey?
Yes.
Councilmember Lukey votes yes. Councilmember Mink?
Yes.
Councilmember Mink votes yes. Councilmember Sales?
Yes.
Councilmember Sales votes yes. Councilmember Alvenos?
No.
Councilmember Alvenos votes no. Councilmember Joanda?
Yes.
Councilmember Joanda votes yes. Councilmember Katz?
Yes.
Councilmember Katz votes yes. Councilmember Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Stewart votes yes. Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez votes yes. Councilmember Balcom?
Yes.
Councilmember Balcom votes yes. Councilmember Friesen?
Yes.
Councilmember Friesen votes yes. Councilmember Glass?
Yes.
Councilmember Glass votes yes.
And that passes 10-1. Thank you, colleagues, for the most thorough and thoughtful conversation we have had this session yet, but I know there will be many more thoughtful conversations. And with that, we're adjourned.
And on County Cable Montgomery.
Roadways are wet and may be